Hey guys, tonight we are stepping straight out of your comfy, blanket-filled reality and plunging boots first into the muddy heart of a medieval market. Imagine it. The dawn is barely brushing the horizon with a pinkish blush, and already the square is crackling with life. You're squinting through a tangle of banners overhead, each one fluttering wild, stamped with a proud coat of arms or an optimistic merchant's lopsided crest. Every breath you take is a dizzy cocktail. Wood smoke, spiced wine, cow manure, fresh bread, something unidentifiably medieval, and that's just before breakfast. All around you, the market stirs and yawns like some enormous beast waking up. There are hawkers setting up stalls with baskets of wilted herbs and wobbly stacks of pottery. A barrel-chested fishmonger claps a slippery eel onto a wooden table as if announcing, "Let the games begin!" The cobblestones are damp under your shoes, if you're lucky enough to have shoes. You take a step only to be nearly mowed down by a donkey dragging a lopsided cart, its driver humming what might be a drinking song or a heartfelt lament for his lost front teeth. Oh, and here's your reality check. You probably won't survive this day without catching a cold, losing a coin, or accidentally purchasing a piglet. Welcome to the medieval marketplace. Part chaos, part wonder, part, I hope my tetanus shots are up to date. So before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 a.m? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey together, here on Timeless Sleep. You ease forward, drawn by the chime of a bell swinging from a timber archway. The crowd is already thick. Every colour and fabric is here. Peasants in coarse browns and greys, a noblewoman shuffling behind her maid, a sharp-eyed friar clutching a basket of apples that looks suspiciously empty. You try not to stare at the tall man in a floppy red hat who appears to be talking to a chicken tucked under his arm. Your senses are assaulted from all sides. Someone's selling roasted onions, their scent thick in the misty air. A baker waves a tray of buns as if fencing with an invisible opponent. Behind him, a woman with her hair coiled like a medieval cinnamon bun shouts the price of her turnips, louder every time a rival tries to undercut her. For all you know, the turnips might actually be valuable. Here, anything is possible. You pass by a group of children playing some chaotic version of tag, shrieking and leaping around the legs of grown-ups. One small boy clutches a string tied to something. You never see what's at the end, but the delighted scream of a pig and the look of resigned misery on a passing dog suggest mischief is afoot. A drummer beats out a rhythm near the well, his drum skin patchy and probably last used to carry potatoes. Each thump vibrates in your bones. Two women haggle over a piece of cloth, arguing whether it's the colour of honest sky or muddy disaster. Meanwhile, a juggler attempts to entertain a small crowd with apples, until, inevitably, a dog snatches one mid-air and chaos erupts, sending a shower of apple slices over a nearby priest. The sense of community is unmistakable, but so is the competition. Merchants call out prices, their voices rising above the clatter and laughter. They boast, exaggerate, and occasionally wink, suggesting, in that sly medieval way, that for you, just for today, they'll make a special offer. If you believe that, you're definitely a first-timer. As you walk, a sudden cheer erupts near a stall. Curious, you edge closer and see a table stacked with jugs and goblets, some pottery, some battered pewter, all mismatched. A cheerful woman in a blue apron gestures at her wares, shouting, "Buy two, get a third for free, or a curse from my mother-in-law, whichever you prefer." The crowd laughs, though you sense a sliver of truth buried in the joke. Nearby, a weaver demonstrates his spinning wheel. His hands move quick as a magician's, and before your eyes, raw wool twists into thread. He boasts he can spin enough for a tunic before the bells ring for vespers. An elderly woman mutters that last week he was promising pants. There's music everywhere, whether it's the raspy whine of a fiddle, the rhythmic clapping of hands, or a song rising from the lips of someone with slightly too much mead in their veins. Children dance, spinning until they collapse in giggles while their parents keep a watchful eye, one on their offspring, the other on their coin purse. The air is full of opportunity, but also of caution. Pickpockets are an occupational hazard here, so you press your hand to your pouch, imagining your modern self suddenly yearning for a zipper. Not that it would help much. In these crowds, even the wiliest town sheriff can be outwitted by a nimble-fingered 8-year-old. An old man sells ribbons and bells, his cart creaking as he moves from one group to the next. Each bell has a slightly different sound, and he claims each one can summon a different kind of luck. Love, gold, safe passage, or the ability to survive your mother-in-law's cooking. Fringe folklore perhaps, but you see plenty of takers, especially as festival season approaches. You're sidetracked by the smell of roasting chestnuts, only to realise it's actually roasting beans, which taste nothing like chestnuts, but are being sold as a delicacy from the far south. The merchant winks. Eat too many, and you'll speak in tongues by nightfall. The locals grin knowingly. You suspect the after effects are not exactly mystical. A group of travelling entertainers passes by, trailing behind a painted cart. A man with a pointed beard balances a ceramic jug on his head, while his companion performs a handstand atop a wooden box. The crowd claps, a few copper coins are tossed, and you spot a sly child slipping a hand into an unattended pocket as all eyes are on the jug. The boundaries between commerce and spectacle are paper-thin here. A seller of sausages also doubles as an amateur poet, reciting bawdy rhymes for anyone who'll listen. His verses are punctuated by his wife's dramatic sighs and the suspiciously regular appearance of her rolling pin. There are rumours in the crowd, always are, always will be. Someone whispers about a new shipment of silk smuggled in past the customs men. Another swears that last week a travelling merchant sold dragon's blood, which, after closer inspection, turned out to be red wine, vinegar, and the tears of disappointed children. As you wind between the stalls, you notice that every surface is a tapestry of colour, noise, and life. Here, an elderly couple examines a row of wooden spoons, arguing over which one will bring out the flavour in soup. There, a girl tries on a garland of woven flowers, peering into a cracked mirror held up by her giggling friends. Historians still argue whether these moments of joy outweigh the daily grind of survival for most townsfolk. Just when you think you've seen it all, a commotion draws your eye to the edge of the market square. A handful of local officials in sombre robes are arguing with a merchant whose scales, they allege, are rigged. He protests his innocence, dramatically tossing apples into the crowd to prove his fairness. A few quick-fingered kids take advantage of the distraction, snatching apples and running off like little highwaymen. You pass a stall that seems to sell everything and nothing, a jumble of bones, ribbons, half-burnt candles, and several bottles of mysterious origin. The seller's eyes twinkle with secrets. She beckons you over, whispering that her wares are all blessed by moonlight, though by the look of them, a good wash might be more effective. You overhear snippets of stories as you walk. A merchant recounting his travels along the old Roman roads, a fisherman boasting about a catch so big it sank his boat twice, a young woman describing the wild antics of last year's festival, when someone tried to race a goat against a pack of children. It ended as you'd expect. Chaos, laughter, a goat with a superiority complex. As noon approaches, the marketplace swells. Sunlight filters through the banners, dust motes swirling in golden beams. There's a sense of shared purpose, an ancient kind of togetherness. For a moment you forget the grime and the noise and the ever-present risk of stepping in something unspeakable. Instead, you feel it, the heartbeat of a living town, everyone woven together in this boisterous, beautiful mess. Wandering toward the outskirts, you notice the quieter stalls. Older women selling wild herbs, a stooped man with a single shelf of wooden toys. Their business is slower, their voices softer. Yet, as you pass, the herbalist presses a bundle of dried lavender into your palm. for restful dreams and maybe to keep away fleas. Practical and mystical, all in one fragrant package. On a bench, two old friends play a slow game of dice. They bicker about the rules, claiming they change every year, possibly every round. You wonder if the true joy of the game is in the argument itself, more than any coin exchanged. The air is thick with the kind of nostalgia that makes you suspect things were never quite as golden as remembered, yet you find yourself smiling at the sheer stubborn optimism. As the afternoon sun leans low, the shadows stretch across the square, and you realise you're part of this living patchwork. The bargains and blunders, the laughter and the whispered warnings all swirl together into a day that is part commerce, part theatre, part... Did that goat just wink at me? Remember the way the bell sounded at dawn, the promise in the air? Now, as the last of the light slips behind the rooftops, you can hear them again, quieter now, almost like a lullaby. You leave the market with dirt on your boots, a questionable pie in your bag, and a story or two you probably shouldn't tell anyone back home. And so end your first steps into the medieval marketplace. Banners, bells, bargains, and all the beautiful, bizarre chaos that makes history feel so oddly familiar even now. It's not long before your stomach, that most practical of medieval market guides, starts to grumble and prod you toward the parade of food stalls lined up along the sun-warmed wall. The smells grow sharper, more enticing, and, let's be honest, a little more dangerous. You're quickly swept into a crowd hovering around a baker's table, where round, crusty loaves and lengths of tough, knobby bread are stacked in teetering towers. Fresh, the baker shouts, though the definition of fresh here seems suspiciously flexible. One loaf, on closer inspection, looks like it could double as a weapon in a tavern brawl. A flash of colour catches your eye. A small girl with an impossible smudge of flour on her nose carries a basket twice her size, hawking sweet buns dusted in what may or may not be real sugar. Behind her, the town's baker, big as an oven, and with arms that look like he's kneaded bread since birth, leans on his counter, cracking jokes, and occasionally cracking a loaf in half, to show the crumb, the inside, for those who've never watched an old British baking show. He gives you a nod, his beard dusted with flour and perhaps the odd breadcrumb from breakfast. You make your way up, eyes wide, scanning the wares. There are rows of flat, dense rye loaves, dark as earth, almost intimidating in their seriousness. You hear a sharp laugh from a neighbour. "Careful with that one, broke my uncle's tooth at Easter." She says it like it's a badge of honour, and the baker grins, waggling a loaf in your direction. Historians still argue whether the so-called toothbreaker bread was intentionally rock hard to make it last through the week, or simply the result of centuries of less than optimal ovens and unpredictable yeasts. For special days, though, the scene is different. Here comes a tray of festival bread, brighter and lighter, dusted with bits of dried fruit and what might be real saffron, though you'd probably need a royal's purse to afford a loaf heavy on the precious spice. Still, you watch as a wealthy-looking merchant's wife snatches one up, nodding as if she's just outmanoeuvred a dozen rivals. Her husband is left clutching a smaller, more sensible hunk of brown barley bread, and a look that suggests he's just lost the household's grocery budget for the month. The regular market-goers know their bread. They'll knock, sniff, even squeeze the crust with a practised air. A suspiciously spry old man claims that the best way to tell is to toss the bread in the air. If it lands upright, it's fresh. If not, you've just invented a new game. Medieval bowling. He demonstrates with a loaf so hard it bounces twice and nearly takes out a duck. It's not just the bread, of course. Each table is stacked with rows of biscuits, some more like sweet buttery bricks, others thin as paper and ready to dissolve at the mere suggestion of tea or cider. Some are spiced with ginger, some with caraway, a few with honey, all of them begging to be dunked in a mug of something strong just to soften the bite. The baker himself boasts, "Try my nutcakes, good for teeth, better for throwing at the neighbour's cat." You eye a tray of flat, round cookies so dense you imagine they'd survive a siege, or maybe a medieval soccer match. But there's a spark in his eye, and the crowd around the stall giggles knowingly. Apparently, the nutcakes are a local in-joke. No one's sure whether anyone actually eats them, or just collects them for emergencies. You sidestep a flour-dusted dog. He seems to be part of the baker's entourage, accepting handouts and sniffing out crumbs. The baker's daughter slides you a small sample, whispering, "Don't try the acorn bread unless you really like surprises." You raise an eyebrow, she just grins and disappears into the crowd. The acorn bread, it turns out, is a rustic delicacy for the desperate or the daring. Historians still argue whether it was truly nutritious or simply a way to stretch flour when times got tough. Not all is friendly rivalry. Bread is a matter of survival, pride, and in some cases social standing. The richer families stroll by with fancy white loaves, lighter and softer, made from wheat sifted until it gleams. The poorer folks, they settle for the hearty, heavy rye or barley bread, dark, filling, and best enjoyed with plenty of ale. There are stories told about the millers who improved their flour by adding chalk or ground beans, and not just to cut corners. Sometimes a loaf is so light, so suspiciously pale, that you wonder if it's half air. There's always debate. One group claims the town's best bread is the simple round rye from the monastery ovens, baked with patience and a mysterious, secret blessing. Another group swears by the festival baker, who sings while he bakes, possibly the only reason his loaves are so tender, or so they say. The crowd teases and banters, each family with their own favourite, each claiming their bread could feed a night for a week. You even hear a story, whispered as if dangerous, that the local lord once had his own baker thrown in the stocks for burning a single loaf. Historians still argue whether medieval lords were really that petty, or if these tales just get more dramatic as the bread gets staler. As you move along, a group of boys challenge each other to see who can eat a piece of old barley bread without pulling a face. The winner receives a slightly less old piece of oatcake as a prize and possibly lifelong bragging rights. The loser, he gets to help haul the day's leftover crust to the pig pens. It's not all fun and games, but even the pigs look wary as the prize approaches. The bread market is a social hub too. News is traded along with loaves. Births, deaths, weddings, and upcoming festivals are all discussed with great seriousness, as if the fortunes of the whole town depend on whether the Tuesday bread is better than last week's. You hear one baker mutter about those city folk, who sprinkle their loaves with poppy seeds, far too fancy for honest country bread. Another counters that only fools and kings would waste good dough on something so frivolous. You're tempted by a woman selling sweet buns, each one glazed with honey and sprinkled with what might be crushed almonds, or possibly something much cheaper but equally toothsome. She presses one into your hand, on the house. Eat it before someone tries to buy it out from under you. The bun is warm, sweet, and for a brief moment you forget that just minutes ago you watched someone use a loaf of bread to block a wagon wheel. The bun tastes of cloves and home, and you wonder if there's a secret recipe hidden somewhere, guarded more fiercely than the town treasury. And of course, no market is complete without the inevitable bread complaints. A burly farmer grumbles that this year's rye is as hard as a saint's conscience. The baker protests, "If it's softer than last year's, you owe me 3 eggs." An old woman interrupts to say she's been eating the same bread for 50 years and sees no reason to stop now. Her teeth apparently are as stubborn as her opinions. Meanwhile, a sly merchant sidles up with a basket of little crisp rolls shaped like birds and hedgehogs. For the children, he assures you, or the grown-ups who are still young enough to dream. The children nearby are already squabbling over which animal is the luckiest. One boy bites into a bread hedgehog, grins, and shows off a gap-toothed smile as proof that bravery and dental risk is its own reward. As you linger near the bakery stalls, the ebb and flow of the market feels almost musical. You hear the gentle drone of conversation, punctuated by laughter and the occasional clatter of falling loaves. Someone starts a song about St. Honoratus, the patron of bakers, and the refrain floats up into the rafters of a nearby covered alley. You half expect the saint himself to step out and inspect the bread for quality, though he'd probably just ask for a slice and a mug of cider. Suddenly the crowd parts for a sombre figure in clerical robes, who steps forward and inspects the bread with the air of a man used to making judgments. The baker bows respectfully. "Father," he says, "try the rye, blessed by the bishop himself." The priest looks dubious, but takes a piece and chews thoughtfully. After a long silence, he nods, declaring, "May it be a blessing to all who eat it, and may their teeth be strong." Everyone laughs, perhaps a little too loudly. You notice a curious scene playing out at the edge of the crowd. A group of young women cluster around a basket of bread rolls shaped like small crowns. The seller, a travelling merchant with a foreign accent, claims these are coronation rolls, baked only on the day a new king is crowned. Whether that's true or not, the rolls vanish quickly, bought as much for the story as for the taste. Historians still argue whether these specialty breads were genuine traditions or just clever marketing. Judging by the crowd's reaction, nobody really cares as long as the bread is good. While the more sophisticated loaves are reserved for special occasions, the humble, rough bread is what most people carry home. Wrapped in a bit of cloth, stuffed into a pocket, it's the foundation of daily meals, eaten plain, dunked in broth, or spread with a rare dab of butter. The market-goers trade tips on how to make a stale loaf edible again. Soak it in cider, toast it by the fire, smash it up for pudding. Even the chickens lurking beneath the stall seem to appreciate the versatility. In one corner, a cheerful juggler offers to balance the town's 3 best loaves atop his head. You watch as he teeters, nearly drops a particularly heavy rye, and is saved only when a nimble-footed girl leaps forward and catches it mid-air. The crowd erupts in applause, and someone tosses the girl a warm sweet bun as a reward. It's a moment of shared silliness, and even the sternest of the market inspectors can't help but grin. By the end of your tour through the bread stalls, your arms are a little heavier, your pockets a little lighter, and your heart unexpectedly warmed. You find yourself weaving the experience into your own story. Perhaps you'll try to bake something similar back home, though hopefully without the added risk of dental disaster. Bread, it turns out, is not just food here. It's an emblem of survival, a canvas for creativity, and a source of endless debate and delight. You step away from the baker's corner, brushing crumbs from your fingers, and cast one last look at the ever-turning dance of sellers and buyers, the rituals of tasting, testing, and haggling that make up the true heart of any medieval market. The square is alive with possibility, and you, with your sturdy, if slightly hazardous loaf tucked under your arm, are ready to discover what lies beyond the next stall. The farther you stroll into the market, the more complex and bewildering the food offerings become. No longer content with bread alone, your appetite, perhaps emboldened by the near miss with a rock-hard rye, draws you to the next frontier of medieval taste, cheese. If bread was the backbone of the medieval table, cheese was surely the character actor, sometimes reliable, sometimes an utter wild card, always rich with flavour, and occasionally with something a little more wriggly. A cluster of stalls at the edge of the market catches your attention, set apart by a wafting aroma that's part savoury delight, part challenge. Here, wheels of cheese are stacked high as shields, some cloaked in wax, others resting in straw, a few simply perched on wooden planks like rustic treasure. The cheese sellers are a breed apart, their aprons dusted with powdery residue, fingers perpetually busy tying off wheels with twine or shaving wedges with practiced flicks of the wrist. The first thing you learn about medieval cheese is that no 2 wheels are ever the same. Some are pale and firm, others oozing at the edges, with blue-green veins or the pockmarks of a well-aged rind. A particularly proud merchant hoists around cheese with a flourish and proclaims it fit for a king, or for your cat, if you don't have a king handy. His sales pitch is punctuated by a flourish of a knife, slicing off a paper-thin wedge for you to sample. The flavour is strong, sharp, grassy, and with a back note of what you can only describe as barnyard. Still, there's an unexpected creamy richness, and you find yourself reaching for another bite. You soon realise that the cheeses here are not all created equal. The peasants favour the hard, salt-rubbed wheels that can last through a season in the larder. These are meant to be sliced thin, eaten with crusty bread, and washed down with ale. The nobility, on the other hand, lean toward the soft white cheeses wrapped in herbs or the strange imported blue cheeses that are said to have healing properties, or, at the very least, clear out your sinuses faster than a drafty castle corridor. Cheese in the medieval market is not just food, it's status, medicine, and occasionally a source of local gossip. You overhear two women arguing about which cheese cured the bailiff's stomachache. One swears by goat's cheese rolled in ash, the other by a sheep's milk roundest under the family's own floorboards. Historians still argue whether these healing cheeses were genuinely effective, or if the placebo effect was alive and well centuries before anyone named it. Then there's the soft cheese that seems to ooze of its own accord, best eaten within a day, or within an hour if you like a little excitement, the seller warns. You watch a local boy poke a wheel, only for a small rivulet of cheese to trickle out, sending him skittering back with a yelp. The vendor grins, adding, "That's how you know it's perfect, or haunted, or both." No one's more proud than the cheesemaker with the wheel speckled with what appear to be live maggots. He beckons you close and whispers, "This is kasumazu, cheese so alive, it dances on your tongue." The bravest in the crowd edge forward, some to buy, others just to gawk. The merchant swears the maggots improve the flavour and keep the cheese tender, though a nearby priest mutters prayers under his breath, possibly to ward off evil spirits or indigestion. You're invited to sample a wedge of sage-flecked cheese, crumbly and aromatic, made by a widow who claims her family recipe has survived war, famine, and her husband's creative attempts at animal husbandry. She shares a wink and tells you the secret is a morning walk through the meadow with her cows, so they remember who's in charge. You're not sure if that's a threat, a joke, or an actual cow training technique. Alongside these rural classics, imported cheeses gleam under careful wraps. A Swiss merchant hawks wheels of nutty, hole-ridden Emmental, while a Venetian traveller offers tiny, delicate rounds, carried across the Alps on a mule who now refuses all dairy products. Their prices are eye-watering, but the curious and well-heeled can't resist. There's even a rumour that the Duke's cook is in the crowd, scouting for a cheese worthy of the next banquet. Historians still argue whether these imported cheeses were genuinely prized, or just a convenient excuse to show off foreign tastes at local feasts. There's drama at one stall where two cheesemakers squabble over the rightful origin of a particularly pungent wheel. "That's my recipe," one protests. "Only I age it in a cave by the river, not in a smoky attic with the laundry." The crowd divides, with everyone weighing in on whether river cave cheese or attic-aged cheese reigns supreme. Someone suggests a taste test, but the vendor retorts, "Last time we did that, the dog joined the monastery." You take that as a sign to move on before you're drafted as a cheese judge. A little farther on, you're lured by the promise of fresh curds, still warm and squeaky from the churn. The seller, a young woman with bright eyes and even brighter opinions, lets you taste a spoonful. It's tangy, milky, and so fresh you suspect the cow might be hiding behind the stall. "Perfect with honey or jam," she insists, offering tiny jars for sale, each one labelled with names like St. John's Berry or Witch's Preserve. You select a pot at random and find the combination delightful, a surprise after your earlier battle with a medieval bread roll. Cheese isn't just about the taste, though. In this market, it's surrounded by superstition and ritual. A cheese left unblessed might be haunted by mischievous spirits, or so the sellers claim. Some cheeses are marked with wax seals, pressed with crosses or local crests, to guarantee purity. One elderly vendor, barely taller than her largest cheese wheel, insists that only cheeses turned every day by hand will bring good fortune. "Skip a day," she warns, "and the cheese will curse your soup for a week." You consider this advice, along with your own culinary luck, before tucking a modest wedge into your basket. There are fringe cheeses too, concoctions involving nettles, thistles, or even, in one bold experiment, sea cheese, brined in ocean water. The latter is an acquired taste, as evidenced by the crowd's mixed reactions. "You'll taste the whole coastline," the seller promises, as a group of teenagers giggles in the background, daring each other to try a bite. A juggler attempts to balance 3 small cheese rounds, the crowd clapping until inevitably one tumbles off and rolls into the path of a nearby duck. The duck, ever the opportunist, snatches it up and waddles off, the juggler taking a theatrical bow. Whether the duck's cheese preferences are a matter of taste or mere opportunity, historians still argue. Meanwhile, the children of the market have their own favourite: small rounds of cheese studded with dried fruits and nuts, perfect for sticky fingers and eager mouths. You see them clustering around the stalls, coins clutched in grubby hands, swapping stories about whose cheese is the luckiest. A merchant encourages the fun, suggesting that if you find a cheese with exactly 3 walnuts inside, you'll have good luck for a year. A few parents roll their eyes, but plenty buy extra just in case. All this dairy drama is punctuated by the ongoing debate over storage. Some vendors insist that cheese is best kept cool and wrapped in cloth. Others swear by hanging it in the chimney, where the smoke will add flavour and presumably keep away the cheese thieves. There's even a heated discussion about whether you should eat the rind or not. One side claims it's full of health, the other warns it'll put hair on your tongue. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the middle, but that doesn't stop the arguments from spiralling into elaborate stories about distant ancestors and heroic cheese-eating feats. As you wander, you find yourself accumulating samples: crumbs, slivers, a slightly suspect wedge that's more air than cheese. Your basket is beginning to look like a cheese lover's treasure chest, each piece holding the promise of a new story, or a mild case of heartburn. Even if you don't understand every variety, you can't help but get caught up in the enthusiasm. This is a place where cheese isn't just food, it's art, ritual, dare, and sometimes outright mischief. Before you leave the cheese district, a last vendor waves you over. She's surrounded by cheeses shaped like animals: mice, cows, even a dragon or two. "For luck at the harvest," she announces, "or just to amuse the children." You can't resist the mouse-shaped cheese, tucking it into your basket as a final prize. With a satisfied sigh, and a mental note to drink plenty of water later, you stroll onward, past the cheese sellers who are now packing away the day's last rounds. The sunlight is shifting, shadows growing longer, and the marketplace continues to swirl around you. A living, breathing celebration of food, folly, and the curious things people have always done to make their daily bread and cheese just a little bit more interesting. You haven't taken more than 10 steps past the cheese stalls before your nose and curiosity are tugged toward a cluster of barrels and casks, their round bellies gleaming beneath stained awnings. Here, the liquid heart of the medieval market pulses, a patchwork of alehouses, mead merchants, and ramshackle drink stands, each one promising a taste of the good life, or at least the slightly dizzy one. The air is thick with the scent of brewing: honey and barley, dark malt, tangy cider, and something sour that's either vinegar or a special kind of house recipe. No one dares question. You sidle up to a row of jugs where a ruddy-faced vendor, sleeves rolled and apron damp, sloshes a frothy mug of brown ale and winks. "Careful, traveller," he says. "You'll leave with a song in your heart, a stumble in your step, and a headache that'll last till Whitsuntide." At your elbow, 2 lads compare tankards, the older one boasting he can drink the town's strongest ale without flinching. The younger looks sceptical, and you're reminded of every pub bet ever made. You're offered a taste, just a sip of something cloudy, tangy, and alarmingly warm. You try not to ask why the tankard is sticky. Is that part of the flavour, or just medieval table service? One mug tastes sweet and sharp, honey and flower petals with a sharp afterkick that almost sings up your nose. "Mead," the brewer declares proudly. "Good for the heart and the spirits, both kinds." He leans in closer, adding, "Some say the Vikings drank it before battle. Some say it's for weddings. Historians still argue whether it made people braver, or just more likely to fall off a horse. You can see both possibilities in the eyes of the crowd. As you lean against a barrel, you notice the mead isn't just for drinking, it's for storytelling. There's an old woman with a crown of dried hops in her hair, holding court for a group of children and one mildly inebriated knight. She spins a tale of a magical mead that, once drunk, could make you understand the speech of animals. "That's how I met my husband," she claims deadpan, and the children squeal with laughter. Further along, a skinny teenager with a mop of straw-coloured hair tries his luck selling apple wine. He insists it's sweeter than a king's kiss, but his stand is suspiciously devoid of customers, unless you count the wasps. You take a cautious sip offered on a carved wooden spoon. It tastes of hope and a little too much vinegar. Let it age another year or two, the boy shrugs, or use it to clean your boots. The market sale stands are a democracy of sorts. Anyone can buy, anyone can sell, as long as you've got the coin and a tolerance for adventure. There's even a side stall with barrels so battered they look like they survived a siege, run by a woman with wild hair and the kind of laugh that promises trouble. She pours a black heavy stout that tastes like roasted nuts and a hint of charcoal. Good for cold nights and strong stories, she says, and claps you on the back so hard your teeth rattle. Mugs and goblets are passed from hand to hand, often without much washing in between. You try not to think about hygiene. The medieval immune system must have been built of sterner stuff, you decide. Or maybe that's why everyone drinks so much ale. It's safer than the water. A joke passes through the crowd. If the water won't kill you, the ale will make you forget your worries, or at least forget where you put your shoes. You look down and check just in case. It's not all jolly revelry, though. There's the town official making his rounds, sniffing at the barrels, occasionally dipping a finger in to test for quality. More than one brewer rolls their eyes when his back is turned, muttering that he's already tasted enough for 3 men this morning. Historians still argue whether these inspectors were honest guardians of public safety, or just very enthusiastic drinkers. There's always someone hawking a miracle cure in liquid form. One man with a shock of white hair and a bottle so cloudy you can't see what's inside insists it's spring tonic, guaranteed to cure gout, rheumatism, broken hearts, and bad manners. One sip, and you'll feel lighter than a feather, he promises. A skeptical housewife mutters that the only thing lighter will be your purse. Of course, not every stall is selling legal drink. You pass a shifty-eyed duo working from the back of a wagon, serving shots of something green that glows in the afternoon light. You ask what's in it, and the younger of the pair grins. Family secret. Drink enough, and you'll see fairies, or the town jail. The older man adds, historians still argue whether our recipe came from the Celts or the local swamp. You politely decline and drift back toward the safer crowd. You're drawn by a commotion at the cider press, where a group of burly men are wrestling with a heap of apples and a massive wooden screw. The cider flows bright and sharp, and a small boy is in charge of keeping the mug steady under the spout. He takes his job very seriously, although he's clearly sampled the product once or twice already. Not far away, a group of women sell homemade cordials, each bottle wrapped in a scrap of bright cloth. The flavours range from elderflower to blackcurrant, with a few medicinal concoctions thrown in. For the nerves, one whispers. For the courage, another claims. You taste a tiny cup of raspberry cordial, sweet and tart, and imagine this is what summer would taste like if you could bottle it. As the afternoon deepens, the laughter grows louder around the ale stalls. There are songs, jokes, and more than a few impromptu toasts. A rowdy group tries to outsing each other, the lyrics growing more creative and slightly less appropriate with each round. There's even an impromptu contest to see who can balance a mug on their head the longest. Winner gets a free refill and inevitably wet hair. You notice too that drinking isn't only for celebration. There are quiet corners where 2 friends share a sombre mug, speaking low and serious about lost harvests, sick livestock, or dreams of something better. The market, for all its noise, leaves room for these quieter moments, grief and hope swirling alongside the smell of brewing grain. A stranger leans over to you, eyes bright. You know, in my grandmother's village, they say if you see bubbles in your ale, you'll have good luck, unless they're from the brewer's dog. You grin and glance into your cup, watching a lazy bubble or two drift to the surface. You decide not to ask about the dog. Then, just as you're thinking you've seen the full parade of medieval drinks, a troupe of minstrels arrives, carrying their own jugs and passing them freely. "To the health of all who listen," cries their leader. The minstrels sip, sing, and swap tales with the crowd. insisting that every good story needs at least 2 refills and a friendly audience. You find yourself in a ring of listeners as a particularly animated minstrel recounts the tale of Sir Oswald and the Endless Tankard, a knight who could never finish his drink, no matter how hard he tried. Historians still argue whether he was cursed or just very, very unlucky, the minstrel winks. Everyone laughs, and a sympathetic old man raises his mug in a silent toast to poor Oswald, wherever he may be. There are rules here, even if they seem to shift with the sunlight. The innkeeper at one tent insists on no fights, no singing before noon, and absolutely no goats inside. You don't ask about the goats, but a couple of the regulars look sheepish. Pun very much intended. A sign on another stand simply reads, "You break it, you drink it." You suspect that's less a policy and more a dare. Amid all this revelry, you spot a peculiar booth. Tiny clay pots, each filled with something murky. The sign proclaims, "Taste the world, imported ales from lands afar." The vendor claims to have mead from the cold north, wine from southern hills, and even beer brewed by monks who never speak. You take a sip of the monk's brew, which is so strong it nearly curls your hair. You're not sure if that's a selling point or a warning. All around you, the market continues to buzz. Some drink for joy, some for courage, some just because it's what you do on market day. At one end of the row, a solemn friar stands with a single bottle of wine, quietly pouring small measures for those who can't afford the livelier stalls. He blesses each cup, and the crowd, rowdy though it is, respects the ritual. You hear a woman murmur, "A little wine for the body, a little peace for the soul." Even in the midst of noise and bustle, there's a sliver of grace. A trio of would-be alchemists stand nearby trying to sell elixirs in bottles shaped like dragons, hearts, and, impressively, a frog. They insist these drinks are enchanted, guaranteed to unlock your true destiny. One bottle promises the gift of prophecy. You buy a tiny sample and find it tastes suspiciously like watered-down honey, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of celery. Historians still argue whether such elixirs were ancient wisdom or enthusiastic marketing. As the sun dips lower, the crowd sways, laughter growing softer and footsteps heavier. There are the telltale signs of a good afternoon: flushed cheeks, arms linked, songs lingering in the air. The ale and mead sellers pack away the empties, while the cider press is still working, a line of hopefuls waiting for one last taste. A dog sleeps in the shade beneath the biggest barrel, snoring loud enough to compete with the fading music. You take one final look at the array of barrels, bottles and mugs, feeling the gentle hum of community, and maybe a little buzz from the drinks. Whether you've sampled the best mead in the county, or survived the worst apple wine in history, you're now a true participant in one of humanity's oldest traditions, raising a cup, sharing a story and toasting the day, no matter what it brings. With a refreshed spirit, and, you hope, a steady gait, you step away from the alehouses, ready to see what new wonders and questionable bargains the medieval market will throw your way next. Before you've even digested your last sip of mead, or determined exactly what was floating in it, the mood of the market shifts. The air seems to pulse with anticipation as you reach a stretch of stalls protected by guards or burly apprentices. On faded cloths and battered wooden boards, treasures from across the known world glitter, glimmer, and tempt you to empty your purse on a whim. The fabled spice merchants are here. Some stalls are so crowded that just getting close is an achievement, one that requires the delicate art of polite elbows and a face that says, "I'm not afraid to haggle." The first thing you notice isn't what you see, it's what you smell. Even above the smoky air and roasting meats, an undercurrent of something sharp, mysterious and ancient teases your senses. Cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper, cloves, ginger, scents that dance together, sometimes harmonizing, sometimes fighting for attention. If there's a single undeniable luxury in the medieval world, it's spice. A single pinch of saffron can cost as much as a week's wage. A handful of peppercorns might be passed down as a family heirloom. and the merchant with the biggest, brightest, or most exotic display is king, at least until someone tries to rob him. One vendor has arranged his spices in tiny wooden boxes, each compartment holding a different colour, from brick red paprika, though no one here calls it that yet, to little rocks of salt so white they sparkle like frost. You watch as a local cook pinches and sniffs, her eyes narrowing in the serious business of flavour. "Genuine cinnamon?" she asks, and the merchant smiles with the confidence of a man who knows half his customers wouldn't know the difference between cinnamon and sawdust. "From the east," he boasts, "carried on the backs of camels and ships, traded for silk and silver and the promise of a new world." He doesn't mention that more than one merchant in history swapped out rare spices with groundnut shells, clever bark, or, in the worst cases, plain old dirt. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were dens of deception or merely creative about their product lines. At another stand, the spice trade is treated with nearly religious reverence. Little jars, some glass, some wax pottery, a few recycled from old ointment pots, hold their precious cargo. There are labels with elaborate script: Venetian pepper, Alexandrian cloves, royal saffron. The vendor, a soft-spoken woman with a hint of mystery in her smile, lets customers sniff, taste, and even test a sliver between their fingers. "A fair trader never hides her goods," she says, inviting you to judge for yourself. You touch a bit of saffron, delicate golden threads that stain your fingertips yellow. "For paella?" you ask, and she laughs, telling you the Spanish haven't invented it yet. "Here, we use it in breads, in stews, sometimes in medicine, a pinch for joy, a pinch for luck." The spice market is where the real drama of commerce plays out. Every buyer suspects they're being swindled, every seller insists their goods are pure. An old tale echoes through the crowd. One merchant's peppercorn is another man's rabbit droppings. The vendors chuckle, some nervously, some with a wink. You see a heated argument flare up between two rival traders over a sack of ginger. Was it truly shipped from India, or did it take a detour through a back alley in Bruges? Historians still argue whether most medieval spices made the whole journey from Asia, or just picked up a new label somewhere in between. A younger apprentice, probably working for his uncle, tries to interest you in dragon's salt. Salt mixed with crushed wild garlic, a shock of red pepper, and a dash of legend. Keeps evil spirits out of your stew, he claims, and maybe even out of your marriage. You decide not to ask if that last part is guaranteed. Next to him, a girl with clever hands mixes up a love powder of rose petals and sugar, promising affection at first bite or at least a nice dessert. Her giggle suggests she's more interested in storytelling than matchmaking. Of course, for every true treasure here, there's a clever fake. You watch as an unsuspecting visitor pays a hefty sum for what he believes to be ground nutmeg, only to be gently corrected by a local, who recognises the blend as bark and bitterness. The merchant is philosophical. If it fools the tongue, it's still spice, isn't it? Not everyone agrees, and a heated debate begins. You quietly slip away, grateful for your own cautious sniff test. One particularly bold merchant offers to let you taste test a rare spice he calls paradise seed. Grains of paradise, an actual medieval favourite, fiery and fragrant. He sprinkles a few into your palm and the burst of flavour is both surprising and delightful. Not for children, he warns, unless you want them running in circles until Michaelmas. You can see the appeal. A tiny bag could wake up even the dullest porridge, and maybe even the sleepiest cousin at a family feast. While spices are often sold in tiny quantities, mere pinches or handfuls, they're sometimes measured out with all the ceremony of a coronation. Scales, weights, and a healthy suspicion fill the air. You watch a vendor carefully tip out peppercorns one by one, counting aloud for a merchant's wife who looks like she's preparing for a royal banquet or a siege. Hard to tell the difference. Every transaction is double-checked, coins a bit for authenticity, and the odd threat of a curse is muttered under someone's breath. As the sun moves through the sky, the spice stalls become a crossroads of conversation. Traders boast of journeys through deserts and across mountains, of near misses with pirates and bandits, and of trading stories with strangers in a dozen tongues. There's a dreamy sense of the exotic here, a reminder that the medieval world was far more connected than most people imagine. You overhear someone reminiscing about the time a Portuguese ship brought back a spice so strong it was banned from the bishop's table, lest it incite unnatural passions. The crowd laughs, and the vendor winks. That's why I always keep some under the counter. Spices aren't just for food, of course. One stall is draped with sachets of dried herbs and flowers, promising health, beauty, or better dreams. Lavender for rest, sage for wisdom, marjoram for memory, the seller intones, his voice low and hypnotic. A mother buys a bundle for her daughter, tucking it into her apron with a smile. You wonder how much of medieval medicine was just the comfort of a familiar scent. A man in battered leather is selling what he claims to be real Indian curry powder, a curious blend of cumin, coriander, and a pinch of fantasy. His customers are sceptical, but intrigued. It's good for stew, or to keep moths out of your pantry. He claims it's equally effective for both, though he winks and admits the recipe changes every week. Historians still argue whether curry ever made it into medieval European kitchens, or if it was all just creative branding. You spot a group of cooks haggling with a pepper merchant, trading tales of ruined feasts and last-minute rescues. Too much clove and you'll have nuns fainting, one warns. Another recounts the infamous ginger incident, in which the abbot's feast was rendered inedible by a misjudged handful. He said it tasted like Christmas, and penance rolled together. The group laughs, and the pepper merchant shakes his head. Spices like life. Just enough, and everything sings. Too much, and you're chasing chickens around the hall. Some stalls double as apothecaries, selling spice blends as medicine. You see little bags labelled for colds, coughs, stomach aches, and melancholy humours. A particularly ancient woman, swaddled in more shawls than you thought possible, offers you a sniff of her wakeful blend. Pepper, mustard, and a touch of mint. Keeps the night demons away, she says. You nod, not entirely sure if she means dreams or something more literal. As you linger, you spot a rare sight. A merchant weighing out saffron threads so carefully, you suspect he's using his own heartbeat as a guide. The cost is astronomical, enough to buy a new pair of shoes, or perhaps a second-hand donkey. Still, a noblewoman pays without flinching, sweeping up the precious powder like it's the most natural thing in the world. You watch, half in awe, half in disbelief. The merchant winks. A little colour for her cakes and a lot of colour for my purse. Meanwhile, the children of the market weave in and out of the spice stalls, sometimes daring each other to taste the hottest pepper or the bitterest root. One wide-eyed boy tries a nibble of dried ginger and immediately runs to the fountain, cheeks red as apples. The vendors smile and shake their heads, another rite of passage complete. The crowd thins as the afternoon deepens and the spice merchants begin to pack away their wares. Scented dust rises into the sunlight, trailing after them like the last note of a good song. You feel a little richer, and only a little lighter in the purse, carrying a small pouch of pepper and a story or two for the folks back home. As you leave the spice quarter, a final whisper of cinnamon clings to your sleeve, a reminder that sometimes history's most powerful treasures come in the tiniest packages. With the spice market's scent still lingering, your steps lead you into the most colourful stretch of the entire medieval bazaar. It's as if someone flung open the doors of 1,000 wardrobes at once. Bolts of cloth cascade over rough tables, banners flutter high overhead, and nearly every merchant here seems to have draped themselves in their own wares as living advertisements. You're in the textile quarter, and the fabric sellers are ready to charm, cajole, and, if necessary, shout their way into your purse. At the entrance, a pair of women are embroiled in a friendly but fierce debate over a length of red wool. It's as bright as a king's cloak, claims the seller, running her fingers over the napped surface. Or as garish as the bishop's cheeks when he's angry, sniffs the customer, but you see her eyeing it with growing longing. Negotiation is an art here, and the stakes are higher than you might expect. Cloth isn't just fashion, it's currency, inheritance and status. sometimes worth more than the livestock stable just a few stalls away. A young man hurries past, balancing a wooden tray piled with silk ribbons so glossy they shimmer in the sunlight. For braids, for blessings, for the next dance, he calls, the ribbons trailing behind him like the tail of a particularly festive kite. 2 children dart in his wake, grabbing at bits of lace and squealing as their mother shoos them away before the merchant can charge her for accidental sampling. One stall glows with bolts of linen, clean and cool, promising the luxury of undergarments that won't itch for days. The seller, a tall woman with a measuring cord looped around her neck, demonstrates the fabric's smoothness by letting it slide through her fingers. Then, with a flourish, rubs a corner on her own cheek. "See," she says, eyes twinkling, "softer than the baker's dreams, and twice as durable." You let yourself be drawn in, feeling the cool, almost crisp texture, wondering if it would really hold up to a few dozen medieval washings in lye and river water. Historians still argue whether linen's legendary longevity is fact or just fond memory, but no one here seems to doubt its value. Beside her, a rival merchant waves a bolt of rougher homespun wool, the earthy brown of last year's fields. True comfort, he insists, keeps you warm even on the coldest night, and only a little scratchy, he demonstrates by holding it to his arm and pretending not to flinch. You notice his own tunic is made from the same cloth, patched in half a dozen places, but still doing its job admirably. He winks at you. Cheaper than silk, and if you spill stew on it, no one will know. Textiles aren't just for clothes. Everybody knows that. Women haggle over linen for tablecloths. Men squint at woven bands that might reinforce a leather saddle. Children clutch at remnants to make ragdolls or repair a favourite cap. A bundle of old banners, faded but still bold, are being auctioned off nearby. One buyer claims he'll hang his over the door to scare the crows and impress the neighbours. There's a practical magic in all these yards and ells. In a world where wardrobes are slim and fashion is slow, every new scrap of cloth is a chance to stand out or to blend in, depending on your needs. A narrow stall in the corner boasts a sign, "Imports from the East." The crowd thickens as word spreads that real silk is for sale, luscious, nearly translucent, and so costly it might as well be spun of gold. The merchant is surrounded by a constant hum of awe, suspicion and longing. She claims her silks crossed deserts, seas, and at least 3 tax collectors' pockets. A noblewoman holds a fluttering scarf up to the light, eyes shining. Fit for a queen, the seller purrs, or the cleverest thief in the city. You wonder which category the lady fits, but decide not to speculate too loudly. A cluster of local spinners, their hands perpetually busy, offer skeins of freshly dyed yarn, sunny yellow, deep woad blue, madder red, and the rare, coveted green that's always in short supply. You watch as they argue about whose plant dyes are the brightest, with one elderly spinner swearing that her marigold-dyed wool once stopped a goat in its tracks. The beast was hypnotised, I tell you, couldn't look away. The others roll their eyes, but everyone admires the results. Cloth is money here, literally. If you can't pay your taxes in coin, a length of fine cloth might do. Dowries are measured in linen sheets and embroidered pillowcases, not just silver. Historians still argue whether the cloth trade fueled medieval economies more than the coin itself, or whether it was just a handy way to keep score. Either way, the cloth stalls are always packed, and the cleverest buyers know to arrive early, before the best bolts are snatched up by rivals. Suddenly there's a commotion at a booth crowded with apprentices. Someone spilled a vat of blue dye, woad probably, and everyone's rushing to sop it up before it stains the cobbles forever. The dye master, a woman with arms dyed faintly blue up to her elbows, shakes her head. That's a week's work down the drain, she sighs, but her apprentice is already scooping up the thick, muddy blue, muttering about new fashion trends. Spotted stockings will be the rage next year, just you wait. The crowd laughs, and a boy splashes his own tunic with a bit of the puddle, earning a slap on the wrist and a secret grin. There are stories everywhere you turn. One old woman claims her shawls are knit from the wool of sheep that graze on the bishop's lands, which makes them holier, and slightly more stubborn in the rain. Another insists that her household's weaver can fit a family of 7 into a single cloak, though you'll have to like each other a lot. There are rumours of a legendary tailor who once stitched a wedding dress entirely out of spider silk, though no one's ever seen it, and some believe it's just a story invented to sell more thread. At a small, carefully arranged stall, you find a collection of veils, scarves, and delicate lacework, each piece a marvel of patience and skill. The vendor, fingers nimble as a magician's, invites you to examine the intricate patterns. "Every knot is a wish, every loop a secret," she murmurs. "Wear this on your wedding day, and your husband will never stray, unless he's as slippery as a fish." You suspect there's a story behind that remark, but she just smiles and turns to the next customer. Jewellery and fabric go hand in hand. A young apprentice sells pins and brooches for holding cloaks closed or fixing a headscarf in place. "Silver for the rich, bone for the practical, wood for the wise," he explains, showing you how even the humblest stick pin can be carved into a lucky animal shape, or a tiny charm to ward off envy. Children line up to trade tiny beads, stringing them together as necklaces or weaving them into their hair, while the local wives gossip about which colour is luckiest for the harvest festival. You spot a merchant rolling out a vast tapestry, its colours deep and bold, telling the story of a battle, knights, dragons, and banners streaming in the wind. "A whole year's work," he declares, running a hand over the woolen surface, "and worth every stitch." The price he names is enough to buy a small flock of sheep. Still, a wealthy farmer's wife is already haggling, her eyes hungry for the prestige such a showpiece would bring to her hall. Among the grand displays are piles of remnants and odd bits, the offcuts of the cloth trade. These are treasures for those with skill and imagination. Patchwork blankets, quilted tunics, doll clothes, even bandages for the local healer. An old man sifts through the scraps searching for a shade of green, just like the one my wife wore when we met. The seller helps him find it, and you catch the flash of a memory, bright as any new bolt. Suddenly, you're drawn into a whirlwind of bargaining. An apprentice tries to interest you in a half-price bundle of yellow wool. "Guaranteed not to fade until next market day," he promises, and after that, who knows? The humour is infectious. Here, every sale is an exchange of wits as much as goods. The buyer wants a deal, the seller wants a profit, and everyone wants a story to tell at supper. A little farther on, you pass a group of children playing at being tailors. They drape themselves in scraps and parade up and down the row, declaring themselves lords, ladies, pirates, and saints. Their laughter ripples through the air, a reminder that for all the solemn business of trade, there's always room for a little mischief. Just as you're about to move on, you spot a merchant quietly folding a shimmering bolt of deep green velvet. She tells you it's reserved for the town's wealthiest widow, who is planning a new gown to outshine every maiden in the county. You catch a glint of envy in the eyes of several passing matrons, and a flurry of whispered speculation about whether the widow is aiming to attract a new husband or just to spite her late one. There's even a whisper of magic here. An old spinner with eyes like storm clouds claims she can weave luck into her thread for the right price. But be careful, she warns. Good fortune in cloth might mean bad luck somewhere else. Whether anyone believes her or just enjoys the drama, the coins still change hands, and her stall never seems empty. As dusk falls and lanterns are lit, the fabric stalls glow golden, casting every colour in new and richer shades. Buyers linger to make last-minute deals, sellers pack away their most precious bolts for safekeeping, and everyone leaves with a scrap, a thread, or a dream for tomorrow's market. You find yourself fingering a length of sky-blue ribbon, wondering if it will bring you luck, love, or simply a memory of a day spent wandering through a sea of colour, texture, and ancient stories. As twilight draws its sleepy blue shadows over the bustle, you wander deeper, past the last ribbons of sunlight flickering on bright cloth, and find yourself in a part of the market that feels older, both in spirit and in superstition. This is the territory of trinkets, charms, and mysterious metals, the domain of the jewellery sellers, the amulet hawkers, and those merchants who deal in objects that promise more than simple beauty. Here, what you buy might not only sparkle, but, according to legend, might alter your fate, cure your ills, or bring you trouble you never expected. The very first thing you notice is the gleam. Little tables are piled high with shining rings, bronze pins, silver brooches, pendants, and the occasional glint of what might be gold, although most market-goers know better than to believe every claim. Jewellery in the medieval world is never just decoration. It's a signal of status, a family heirloom, a prayer in metal, or even a subtle way to carry a grudge. A boy, barely older than 12, stands behind a table covered in rings, some with glass gems, others with real stones, or at least stones heavy enough to pass for real if you don't look too closely. He holds one up to the fading light and promises, "Luck in love, fortune in dice, and never a lost coin if you wear this." You ask him if it works for everyone, and he laughs. "It worked for my cousin. She married a baker and never counts her pennies." The people nearby chuckle. You suspect most come as much for the banter as the bargains. Every stall here is a stage. One woman with silver hair and wrists lined with bangles rattles off the supposed powers of her wares. A brooch to keep nightmares away, a necklace to bring healthy children, a copper ring that guarantees safe travel. Or at least you'll look brave as you run from danger, she adds with a wink. Each trinket comes with its own story. Historians still argue whether the charm trade ever truly protected its buyers, or simply provided comfort in a world that rarely offered guarantees. You watch as an old farmer selects a pewter cross, his thumb rubbing over the engraved lines as if drawing courage from the cold metal. A pair of sisters debate over matching heart pendants, both anxious to buy but unable to agree who should pay. A wealthy merchant's daughter eyes a chain with a carved ivory pendant, the shape suspiciously like a saint's finger. The merchant assures her it's just bone, but blessed by a wandering friar. Whether the story is true or not, the price is doubled the moment he whispers blessed. Some jewellery is meant for healing. Tiny amulets stamped with runes or the image of a saint are sold for fever, for bad dreams, or for warding off the evil eye. One stall features a painted sign, "Charms for cows, children and courage." The woman behind it demonstrates her wares with theatrical flair, passing a heavy iron key from hand to hand and declaring, "This keeps the spirits out of your cellar and the rats out of your bread." You notice she has plenty of both for sale, perhaps just in case the charm doesn't quite do the trick. It's not all hopeful magic though. A grim-faced old man, whose table is set with iron rings and rough-cut crystals, offers what he calls protection for the desperate. He points to a heavy, tarnished amulet and claims it keeps the tax man at bay. There's a ripple of laughter from the crowd, but more than one buyer pockets a charm with a worried look, glancing around as if the local reeve might appear at any moment. You catch snippets of older, darker tales. A mother hushes her child as they pass a stall where toadstone rings glint on velvet. "To cure poison," the merchant explains solemnly, or so the wise women say. The child stares wide-eyed, perhaps hoping for a toadstone of her own, or perhaps just hoping she never needs one. Another table features pendants set with wolf teeth and feathers, said to bring strength in battle, or at least the courage to ask for a second helping at supper. Of course, where there is hope, there is also fear and profit. The rumour ripples through the jewellery quarter. A woman once bought a ring here that brought her nothing but bad luck. It was a witch's ring, the tale goes, lost by a jealous wife and found by a greedy hand. Historians still argue whether medieval folk believed more in the power of a curse or the hope of a blessing, but one thing is clear. The stories themselves are half the value of anything you buy. On a battered cloth, a hunched man sells what he claims are Roman coins, found in the old fields beyond the town walls. Each coin is heavy and cold, stamped with a worn emperor's face. Are they real? Are they centuries old, or the work of a clever local smith with too much time on his hands? The man just smiles and shrugs. All money is luck, he says, but old money, now that's double luck or double trouble. You find yourself drawn to the smoothness of one coin and slip it into your purse, more for the feeling of history in your hand than any hope of ancient riches. There are also newer inventions, rings for the fingers, but also rings for the ears and nose, and even the occasional tooth ring. Yes, a tiny band of gold or silver worn around a tooth, a fleeting fashion among the young and bold. One apprentice shows off his new tooth jewellery, grinning widely to display a tiny dot of silver on a molar. For luck in love, he claims, though his sweetheart in the crowd just laughs, or for attracting magpies. The jewellery quarter is a carnival of sights and sounds. A musician plucks at a lyre beside a cellar of glass beads, the notes rising and falling with the flicker of candlelight. Children dart between the tables drawn by shiny things, while the adults pretend to bargain but really just want to listen to another story. A group of local boys challenge each other to see who can find the ugliest brooch, and the winner is rewarded with a day-old honey cake and eternal glory, at least until the next market day. Some of the pieces here are simple and sweet. Strings of wooden beads, shells polished to a dull shine, tiny carved hearts or animal shapes. Others are elaborate, filigree necklaces for the rich, inset with bits of coloured glass or, on occasion, real gems brought by a merchant from the far-off mines of Hungary, or maybe just up the river a ways. Even the simplest token can become a treasure in the telling. A girl tucks a bone pendant into her sleeve, smiling as if it's the most precious thing in the world. There's a trend among young men for pewter amulets shaped like swords or shields, for courage in tournaments or in love. A few are even inscribed with clever little riddles, meant to be deciphered by the right person. One love-struck boy quietly asks the vendor to engrave his sweetheart's initials on a tiny copper heart. "For her or for luck?" the merchant asks. The boy blushes. "For both," he whispers. For all the laughter and drama, there are genuine works of art here too. A silversmith working by the light of a flickering lantern demonstrates his craft with delicate hands, shaping filigree wire into a delicate bird. "Each piece takes a week," he explains, not looking up from his work. "A good brooch is worth more than a bad horse, and twice as faithful." The crowd is mesmerised, and you realise this is a place where skill is celebrated, not just the stories. The sun has set now, and lanterns throw pools of golden light over the jewellery quarter. Shadows dance among the sellers, and you notice that business isn't over when darkness falls. A small, secret trade begins. Pieces slipped into waiting hands, a quick wink, an exchange of something more than money. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's hope. Maybe it's a promise. Historians still argue whether the real treasure of the medieval market was the goods or the gossip exchanged after sunset. You linger at the last table, where a woman with hair like midnight offers you a choice of 2 rings. "One brings dreams, one brings truth," she says, and her eyes seem to twinkle in the lantern light. You pick the heavier one, not for its promised magic, but because it reminds you of all the hands that have passed through this market before you, each with their own wishes, their own secrets, their own longing for a little shimmer in the dark. Tucking your new talisman safely away, you slip back into the flow of the market, listening as the bells ring out for evening prayers. For a moment the world feels suspended in that golden hush between sunset and true night, and you understand why people have always been drawn to these busy magical places, where you might buy a brooch, a legend, or perhaps a little luck to carry home. With twilight thickening and the lanterns glowing brighter along the alleys, your next footsteps carry you toward the unmistakable clang of metal on metal, the clatter that announces the weapons dealers and their domain. If the jewellery sellers trade in hope and whispers, this stretch of market deals in more direct promises, safety, strength, and sometimes outright trouble. Here, in a world where every dispute might end with a drawn blade and every journey holds its dangers, the weapon stalls are both tempting and a little terrifying. The first sight that greets you is a table laid out with knives. Big ones, little ones, curving blades, stubby daggers, each with its own story and personality. The seller, a burly man with arms like oaken branches, flashes a grin that's half challenge, half sales pitch. "Got a bone to pick, traveller?" he calls, "or a steak to carve? Either way, you'll find your match here. He runs a whetstone along a blade with a practiced hand, sending up a curl of sparks. You can't help but wonder how many generations have sharpened knives at this very spot. His table is just the beginning. Beyond it, racks of swords glint, some long and lean, others short and broad, a few so battered that they look as if they've already survived more battles than most knights. There are wooden practice swords for the hopeful, iron-bladed arming swords for the ready, even a rust-flecked longsword that the merchant claims was swung at Agincourt. You're fairly sure it's been swung at 100 sausages since then, but the legend is included in the price. A group of boys crowd around a display of daggers. Each one seems to fancy himself a squire or a future knight, eyes wide at the possibilities. One lad points to a blade with an ornate hilt, inlaid with red glass. That one's for heroes, the vendor assures him, or the most careful thieves. The boy's mother drags him away, muttering about, "Enough trouble in the house already." It's not just swords and daggers, though. The array sprawls into axes, bearded and broad, the kind you'd trust to split logs or enemies. There are spears with iron tips, halberds for those who fancy a bit of flair, and a few hefty clubs that look like they were whittled from tree trunks in a fit of rage. The weapons aren't just for warriors. Even farmers haggle for knives sturdy enough to gut a boar or defend a sheepfold from wolves, both the four-legged and the two-legged kind. A weapons dealer with a black patch over one eye, his souvenir from the Crusades he claims, holds court at the centre of it all. He's surrounded by admirers, all listening to his tales. This mace belonged to a real knight. Never failed him, well, until it did. The crowd laughs, but you see more than one customer slip him coins for a closer look. He runs his hand over a pitted helmet, still bearing the marks of old blows, and offers a battered shield for a song or a smile, or maybe just a good story in return. There's a curious camaraderie in this part of the market. Buyers test the weight of blades, swing axes in wide arcs, carefully mostly, and compare the balance of daggers. There are demonstrations too. A wiry woman in a leather jerkin shows how to wield a quarterstaff, her movement sharp and precise. For thieves, for bandits, for brothers with bad tempers, she jokes, twirling the staff like a baton. Someone in the crowd tries to mimic her, promptly smacking his own knee and earning a round of gentle applause. Not everyone here is after serious weaponry. A pair of local youths try to talk the vendor into selling them a training sword, which turns out to be a stick with a bit of leather nailed to one end. It'll do for scaring crows, the merchant laughs, and maybe the neighbour's dog. Another man, older and quieter, spends an age inspecting a selection of throwing knives. For boar hunting, he claims, though the gleam in his eye suggests he might have other targets in mind. There are even stalls selling booby traps, ingenious if slightly terrifying devices of sharpened wood, swinging weights, or carefully hidden spikes. To guard the garden, the pantry, or the chicken coop, the vendor explains with a sly grin. You're pretty sure most chickens would rather take their chances with the fox. Still, the crowd is fascinated, and more than one farmer leaves with a new purchase and a wicked smile. The market's blacksmiths, of course, are its quiet powerhouses. Tucked behind the weapons tables, their forges belch smoke and sparks into the night air. You watch as a smith hammers out a blade, the ringing blows echoing down the alley like church bells. He tests the edge, nods with satisfaction, and slides it into a bucket of water, sending up a hiss and a cloud of steam. Best steal this side of the mountains, he tells anyone who will listen, and the line at his stall proves he's not the only one who thinks so. There's more to buying a weapon than simply picking it up and handing over your coins. Each seller asks questions. What do you need it for? What hand do you fight with? Are you quick or careful, bold or clever? It's as much matchmaking as it is trade, and you realise these merchants are half counsellor, half armourer. A good sword suits its owner, one woman insists, and a bad one is just waiting for a chance to run away. Amid the blades and bluster, there's always a touch of humour. A wiry old man sells duelling spoons, long-handled, polished to a shine. For kitchen quarrels or the deadliest soup, he quips, demonstrating his best parrying stance. The children love it, clamouring for a turn, and more than one adult is persuaded to purchase a set for special occasions. Nearby, a fletcher is selling arrows, some with broad heads for hunting, others with blunted tips for sport or training. The feathers are dyed bright blue or yellow, so you can find them after you miss, he winks. His best customer is a local boy whose father, trying to look stern, buys a dozen and mutters, "Let's see if these last the week." You get the feeling he's betting against it. There's always an edge of danger in the air. Town guards keep a watchful eye on these stalls, alert for stolen goods or troublemakers. An argument breaks out over the provenance of a sword. Was it truly a knight's, or simply a well-polished butcher's tool? Voices rise, hands hover near hilts, but the guards step in before things escalate. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were hotbeds of violence or generally kept the peace through sheer numbers and the ever-watchful eye of the law. There are tales, of course, there always are. The merchant with the eye patch claims his best dagger once belonged to a thief so clever he robbed himself. Another insists that a battered shield was used at the Battle of Crecy. See this dent? That's from a French arrow, or maybe a runaway goat. The crowd laughs, and you realise that for every true relic there are a dozen stories, each one worth its weight in silver, or at least in smiles. One woman, her hair bound in a red scarf, displays a set of witches' knives, narrow-bladed, inscribed with mysterious runes. For herbs, she claims, or for cutting the strings of fate. A few buyers cross themselves as they pass, while others lean in, intrigued by the idea of magic hidden in metal. Historians still argue whether such charms ever held real power, or simply gave people the courage to shape their own luck. As night deepens, the crowd here is slow to thin. Buyers and sellers linger, talking over old battles, lost causes, and future dreams. A young couple bargain for a matching set of daggers, laughing at the idea of his and hers weaponry. A mother quietly buys a stout walking stick, for long journeys or stubborn husbands. You watch as a group of teenagers pool their coins for a battered shield, then parade off, practicing their best heroic poses under the lanterns. At the edge of the market, a battered old man with only one hand offers slings and simple cudgels. For those who can't afford steel, he says softly, but still want to walk safe. His customers are fewer, but no less grateful. The weapon stalls aren't only for the rich or the brave, they're for anyone who wants to feel a little safer in a world where danger is always near. There are moments of real solemnity too. At one table, a father and son choose a knife together, testing the grip, arguing quietly about the balance. The father presses a coin into the boy's palm, and the seller nods with understanding. It's a rite of passage, this moment, one as old as the market itself. By the time you leave the weapons quarter, the weight of steel and story seems to cling to your skin. You've seen blades made for war and for pride, for daily work and for dreams. You realise, with a shiver, that in the medieval market every purchase is a risk and a hope, a promise that tomorrow you'll still be here to tell the tale. Just when you think you've seen every drama and deal the medieval market can offer, a different, more elemental music calls you onward, the ringing, clanging and hissing of metal as it meets fire and water. This is the blacksmith's row, a smoky thoroughfare where the air is thick with the scent of hot iron, singed leather and pure human determination. Here, the magic isn't in amulets or whispers, it's in sweat, soot, and the undeniable heat of the forge. The first stall you reach is open to the sky, bordered by battered barrels and heaps of raw materials. Sparks leap from the mouth of the forge as a burly blacksmith pounds glowing metal on his anvil, each hammer blow echoing through the twilight. His apron is charred, his arms a patchwork of scars, and his gaze focused with the kind of intensity that makes small children stare, and mischievous dogs think twice before snatching a sausage from his lunch. As you draw near, he pauses just long enough to nod, a brief dignified acknowledgement that you are for a moment welcome in his world. Laid out on a wide plank table are the tools and treasures of medieval daily life. Iron pots, kettles, cauldrons, pans, roasting spits, ladles, fire tongs and more. Each piece bears the subtle stamp of its maker, a squiggle here, an initial there. The blacksmith gestures to a heavy stew pot, its rim still hot from the forge, and gruffly proclaims, "Made to last longer than my patience," and that's saying something. You pick it up and feel the weight, the comforting solidity. You imagine stews simmering over the fire, savoury with whatever the market has offered up that week. Hare if you're lucky, turnips if you're not. His neighbour, a wiry woman with ash streaks in her hair, is the resident tinker and mender. She proudly displays a pyramid of battered pots and pans, each one newly patched, riveted or rebottomed. "Better than new," she claims, slapping the rim of a saucepan with a wooden spoon for emphasis. "A pot that's survived 3 fires and 2 husbands will see you through anything." The crowd nearby laughs, and one old man teases that her mending magic might be the best bargain in the whole market. It's a world of rivalry and respect. One blacksmith, thick-fingered and broad-shouldered, barks a greeting at his neighbour, who responds with a theatrical scowl and a jibe about last week's crooked ladles. The apprentice on bellows duty rolls his eyes, fanning the coals with one hand while munching an apple with the other. The banter is constant, a mixture of good-natured insults and not-so-subtle boasts about who can make a better hinge or shoe a more stubborn mule. There's artistry here as well as muscle. You watch as a smith heats and bends iron into intricate scrollwork for a customer's front gate, his hands as delicate as a painter's. On another table, rows of door knockers shaped like lions, griffins, and grotesque faces are displayed, each one fierce enough to scare off even the most determined tax collector. A boy tries one, letting it fall with a clang that draws laughter from the crowd and a half-hearted glare from his mother. Every piece of iron here has a purpose, and nearly all are sold with a story. The blacksmith claims his frying pans never stick, unless your mother-in-law's in the kitchen. His neighbour insists her roasting spits turn themselves if you sing the right tune. And everyone has an opinion about whose nails are sharpest, whose horseshoes luckiest, and whose axes can split more than just firewood. Historians still argue whether these boasts were marketing genius, or just the natural optimism of people who spend their lives surrounded by red-hot metal. Beyond the kitchenware, the blacksmiths are responsible for the bones and sinews of the town itself. Hinges for doors, locks for chests, latches for windows, weather vanes for rooftops, and grates for the hearth. You spot a merchant negotiating for a new padlock. "Nothing fancy, just thief-proof, please," and the smith assures him with a wry smile. "Thief-proof, fool-proof, even brother-in-law proof, if you're willing to pay for the extra iron." The merchant laughs, but pays the price, slipping the lock into his satchel, as if it's worth more than gold. There's a stall just beyond, run by a man whose hands are surprisingly clean. He specialises in household tools, scissors sharp enough to shear sheep or hare, keys for doors and coffers, fish hooks, candle snuffers, even iron combs for those who like their hair and their scalp toughened at the same time. A group of young women test the scissors, slicing strips of cloth with delight, while an old woman grumbles about the price of good iron these days. The merchant bows and suggests, "Perhaps it's the price of sharpness, not iron." The old woman cackles, "You've never met my tongue." There's a gentle irony that floats above the clang and bustle. For all the roughness of the smiths, they are the silent support behind every household. A man in a fur hat brags about his new pot. "So sturdy, my grandchildren will still be boiling bones in it when I'm gone." Another swears his kitchen was haunted by gremlins until he bought a new iron trivet. A blacksmith, listening with a grin, adds, "Or maybe you just stopped burning your stew." A nearby stall is devoted to nails. Yes, just nails. Big ones, little ones, square, round, twisted, even decorative ones for the front doors of fancier houses. The vendor, a chatty young man, claims to have invented the perfect nail. Goes in straight, comes out never. A few sceptical builders listen closely and one asks, "How many saints did you pray to for that?" The vendor laughs, "All of them, and the Virgin twice for good measure." The rivalry between the smiths is fierce but honest. They trade gossip along with their wares. Who needs a new cauldron? Who's run through 3 door knockers in a month? Who keeps losing keys? And who keeps finding them? There's a story circulating about a rival market across the river, where the blacksmiths supposedly use bog iron that crumbles if you look at it sideways. Our iron, boasts one local smith, is so tough the devil himself chipped a tooth on it. Whether anyone believes these tales is beside the point. The stories are worth nearly as much as the tools themselves. The apprentices are everywhere, running errands, manning bellows, fetching water, and, occasionally, burning themselves on hot metal with a yelp. You see one boy, face smeared with soot, practicing his hammer swing on a scrap of iron. His master watches with a critical eye, muttering corrections. When the apprentice finally gets it right, the smith rewards him with a nod and a rare smile. "That'll do, lad. That'll do." The pride in both their faces is unmistakable. Night deepens and the forges cast an orange glow over the row, making every smith look a little like a sorcerer in a story. Lanterns flicker, smoke drifts upward, and you realise that this part of the market is never fully asleep. If a hinge breaks at midnight, or a lock jams, or a cauldron falls off the fire, someone will bang at the smithy's door, and the smith, grumbling but willing, will answer. You watch as a couple brings in a battered iron skillet, bottom burned and handle loose. The tinker examines it, taps the edge, and then sets to work. In minutes, with practiced efficiency, she's tightened the rivets, hammered the base flat, and even sharpened the edge for good measure. She holds it up, shining in the firelight. Good for another 100 meals at least, unless you let the cat cook. The couple laughs and pays her, leaving with a skillet that seems to weigh as much as their gratitude. Nearby, a man sells tools for every craft imaginable: hammers, chisels, awls, and more. Each is polished, perfectly balanced, and ready to work. The right tool is half the job, he tells you, and the other half is not losing it. He shares a knowing look with an old carpenter who promptly buys 3, just in case the gremlins visit my shed. In the midst of it all, the blacksmith's unofficial leader, an older woman with a voice like a cracked bell, reminds everyone to check their work before the festival tomorrow. Nothing worse than a stuck spit or a snapped hinge when there's roast on the fire. Her apprentices scramble, double-checking every joint and seam, while she inspects each piece with the discerning eye of a general surveying her troops. There's one final drama as you pass. A farmer, red-faced and frustrated, argues with a blacksmith about a plough blade. It was supposed to cut like new, he complains. The blacksmith inspects it, shrugs, and with a deft swing sharpens it right there. He then points at the farmer's boots. Might help if you cleaned off half the field before ploughing the rest. The crowd snickers, the farmer laughs, and peace is restored. Historians still argue whether such market banter was a daily delight, or just the natural soundtrack to the endless work of keeping a medieval town running. As you drift away from the forge light, a last glimmer of red-orange warmth trailing after you, you realise that the blacksmith's row is more than just a place to buy things. It's the backbone of the whole market, a world of labour, laughter, and the steady, soothing rhythm of hammer and anvil. Laid out on a wide plank table are the tools and treasures of medieval daily life. Iron pots, kettles, cauldrons, pans, roasting spits, ladles, fire tongs, and more. Each piece bears the subtle stamp of its maker, a squiggle here, an initial there. The blacksmith gestures to a heavy stew pot, its rim still hot from the forge, and gruffly proclaims, "Made to last longer than my patience," and that's saying something. You pick it up and feel the weight, the comforting solidity. You imagine stews simmering over the fire, savoury with whatever the market has offered up that week. Hare if you're lucky, turnips if you're not. His neighbour, a wiry woman with ash streaks in her hair, is the resident tinker and mender. She proudly displays a pyramid of battered pots and pans, each one newly patched, riveted or rebottomed. Better than new, she claims, slapping the rim of a saucepan with a wooden spoon for emphasis. A pot that's survived 3 fires and 2 husbands will see you through anything. The crowd nearby laughs, and one old man teases that her mending magic might be the best bargain in the whole market. It's a world of rivalry and respect. One blacksmith, thick-fingered and broad-shouldered, barks a greeting at his neighbour, who responds with a theatrical scowl and a jibe about last week's crooked ladles. The apprentice on bellows duty rolls his eyes, fanning the coals with one hand while munching an apple with the other. The banter is constant, a mixture of good-natured insults and not-so-subtle boasts about who can make a better hinge or shoe a more stubborn mule. There's artistry here as well as muscle. You watch as a smith heats and bends iron into intricate scrollwork for a customer's front gate, his hands as delicate as a painter's. On another table, rows of door knockers shaped like lions, griffins and grotesque faces are displayed, each one fierce enough to scare off even the most determined tax collector. A boy tries one, letting it fall with a clang that draws laughter from the crowd and a half-hearted glare from his mother. Every piece of iron here has a purpose, and nearly all are sold with a story. The blacksmith claims his frying pans never stick, unless your mother-in-law's in the kitchen. His neighbour insists her roasting spits turn themselves if you sing the right tune, and everyone has an opinion about whose nails are sharpest, whose horseshoes luckiest, and whose axes can split more than just firewood. Historians still argue whether these boasts were marketing genius, or just the natural optimism of people who spend their lives surrounded by red-hot metal. Beyond the kitchenware, the blacksmiths are responsible for the bones and sinews of the town itself. Hinges for doors, locks for chests, latches for windows, weather vanes for rooftops, and grates for the hearth. You spot a merchant negotiating for a new padlock. Nothing fancy, just thief-proof, please, and the smith assures him with a wry smile, thief-proof, fool-proof, even brother-in-law proof, if you're willing to pay for the extra iron. The merchant laughs, but pays the price, slipping the lock into his satchel, as if it's worth more than gold. There's a stall just beyond, run by a man whose hands are surprisingly clean. He specialises in household tools, scissors sharp enough to shear sheep or hare, keys for doors and coffers, fish hooks, candle snuffers, even iron combs for those who like their hair and their scalp toughened at the same time. A group of young women test the scissors, slicing strips of cloth with delight, while an old woman grumbles about the price of good iron these days. The merchant bows and suggests, perhaps it's the price of sharpness, not iron. The old woman cackles, you've never met my tongue. There's a gentle irony that floats above the clang and bustle. For all the roughness of the smiths, they are the silent support behind every household. A man in a fur hat brags about his new pot. So sturdy my grandchildren will still be boiling bones in it when I'm gone. Another swears his kitchen was haunted by gremlins until he bought a new iron trivet. A blacksmith listening with a grin adds, or maybe you just stopped burning your stew. A nearby stall is devoted to nails. Yes, just nails. Big ones, little ones, square, round, twisted, even decorative ones for the front doors of fancier houses. The vendor, a chatty young man, claims to have invented the perfect nail. Goes in straight, comes out never. A few sceptical builders listen closely and one asks, how many saints did you pray to for that? The vendor laughs, all of them, and the Virgin twice for good measure. The rivalry between the smiths is fierce but honest. They trade gossip along with their wares. Who needs a new cauldron, who's run through 3 door knockers in a month, who keeps losing keys, and who keeps finding them. There's a story circulating about a rival market across the river, where the blacksmiths supposedly use bog iron that crumbles if you look at it sideways. Our iron, boasts one local smith, is so tough, the devil himself chipped a tooth on it. Whether anyone believes these tales is beside the point. The stories are worth nearly as much as the tools themselves. The apprentices are everywhere, running errands, manning bellows, fetching water, and, occasionally, burning themselves on hot metal with a yelp. You see one boy, face smeared with soot, practicing his hammer swing on a scrap of iron. His master watches with a critical eye, muttering corrections. When the apprentice finally gets it right, the smith rewards him with a nod and a rare smile. That'll do, lad, that'll do. The pride in both their faces is unmistakable. Night deepens and the forges cast an orange glow over the row, making every smith look a little like a sorcerer in a story. Lanterns flicker, smoke drifts upward, and you realise that this part of the market is never fully asleep. If a hinge breaks at midnight, or a lock jams, or a cauldron falls off the fire, someone will bang at the smithy's door, and the smith, grumbling but willing, will answer. You watch as a couple brings in a battered iron skillet, bottom burned and handle loose. The tinker examines it, taps the edge, and then sets to work. In minutes, with practiced efficiency, she's tightened the rivets, hammered the base flat, and even sharpened the edge for good measure. She holds it up, shining in the firelight. Good for another 100 meals at least, unless you let the cat cook. The couple laughs and pays her, leaving with a skillet that seems to weigh as much as their gratitude. Nearby, a man sells tools for every craft imaginable: hammers, chisels, awls, and more. Each is polished, perfectly balanced and ready to work. The right tool is half the job, he tells you, and the other half is not losing it. He shares a knowing look with an old carpenter who promptly buys 3, just in case the gremlins visit my shed. In the midst of it all, the blacksmith's unofficial leader, an older woman with a voice like a cracked bell, reminds everyone to check their work before the festival tomorrow. Nothing worse than a stuck spit or a snapped hinge when there's roast on the fire. Her apprentices scramble, double-checking every joint and seam, while she inspects each piece with the discerning eye of a general surveying her troops. There's one final drama as you pass. A farmer, red-faced and frustrated, argues with a blacksmith about a plough blade. "It was supposed to cut like new," he complains. The blacksmith inspects it, shrugs, and with a deft swing sharpens it right there. He then points at the farmer's boots. Might help if you cleaned off half the field before ploughing the rest. The crowd snickers, the farmer laughs, and peace is restored. Historians still argue whether such market banter was a daily delight, or just the natural soundtrack to the endless work of keeping a medieval town running. As you drift away from the forge light, a last glimmer of red-orange warmth trailing after you, you realise that the blacksmith's row is more than just a place to buy things. It's the backbone of the whole market, a world of labour, laughter, and the steady, soothing rhythm of hammer and anvil. Stepping away from the forge's fiery glow, you find yourself drawn to an altogether different kind of booth, one that seems to breathe secrets, shadows, and the ever-alluring promise of miracles in a bottle. The apothecary stalls are a world unto themselves. Here, under a canopy heavy with dried herbs, bundles of roots and strings of garlic, you're invited to trade your coin for hope. Tonics, plasters, salves, and the whispered assurance that what you take home might just cure what ails you, or at least make you sleep a little easier at night. It's quieter here, a kind of hush floating above the stall as people approach with hope and caution in equal measure. The first table you reach is cluttered with earthenware jars, each one hand-labelled in spidery script, for sorrowful dreams, for aching bones, for courage in the dark. The woman behind the table wears a cloak lined with tiny stitched moons and stars. Her eyes, bright as glass beads, scan every customer with the clinical sharpness of someone who's seen plenty of complaints, both real and imagined. Her hands move constantly, measuring, grinding, mixing, sealing small packets with wax. A young man ahead of you is holding his arm, grimacing. "Fell from a ladder," he mutters. The apothecary tuts and presents a plaster of greenish hue, promising it will draw out the bad humours and return your arm to its proper duties. He sniffs but applies it, and she offers a small bottle. "For the pain, and for keeping secrets," she adds, lowering her voice. You catch a whiff as the stopper is pulled. Vinegar, honey, and something sharp, almost medicinal. He pays and moves off, cradling his purchase with more trust than you'd expect from a man in pain. On the next table, tiny vials glimmer in the flickering lantern light. "Elixirs and cordials for all manner of ills," reads the painted sign, and the apothecary, a short man with wispy white hair and an encyclopedic knowledge of complaints, demonstrates with a flourish. "This one," he says, holding up a violet bottle, for the chills that cling in spring, and this, a dark brown mixture, for belly grumbles that threaten supper. His claims are bold. I've kept half this town out of the grave this winter, and the other half still waiting for my bill. The nearby crowd laughs, but you sense they believe at least half his claims. Historians still argue whether the medieval apothecary was a true healer, a well-intentioned quack, or just the most successful gossip in town. Not every remedy here is strictly medicinal. Stomach powder is offered for the weak of constitution, but it's also quietly recommended for those with a tendency to worry after a big feast, or perhaps after one too many tankards of the local mead. Better safe than sorry, the seller whispers, slipping an extra packet to a nervous-looking baker's apprentice, especially with your mother's pies. The apprentice tries not to look offended. You try not to laugh. Some tables lean heavily toward the mystical. There are tiny sachets of herbs tied with red thread, guaranteed to keep bad dreams at bay. One seller offers an amulet of sleep, a cloth pouch filled with lavender, mugwort, and something he won't name. Place it under your pillow, and if your sleep isn't sweeter, you can blame the weather. A few old women snicker, and one tells you, the only true cure for nightmares is a good conscience, or a bigger dog. Cures for common colds are everywhere. Honey mixed with garlic, vinegar syrup, onion plasters, and concoctions that promise to clear the chest and sweeten the temper. The apothecaries are careful never to guarantee too much, though. Most people get better, one old woman mutters, and the rest weren't meant for this world anyway. Still, hope is a powerful medicine, and the stall never seems empty. You notice some remedies are reserved for those with a little extra coin. Glass jars with gilded lids contain imported powders from faraway lands. A merchant in silk buys a vial, the apothecary promising it contains a sun-dried root from Cathay, ground by the hands of wise men. Whether it works or not is beside the point. Owning a foreign cure is almost as good as being cured. A crowd gathers, and soon a second jar is sold, the seller now claiming there's only one left until next week's shipment. For the less wealthy, there are local herbs: nettles for spring tonic, elderflowers for fever, dandelion for purifying the blood, and mint for settling the spirits. Each herb comes with a story: nettle tea for waking up lazy sons, elderflower syrup for children who'd rather sleep than work, and a special blend of thrice-blessed thyme to keep away the evil eye and stubborn colds. You overhear two grandmothers trading recipes, each swearing hers is the true and only cure for coughs. There are more questionable cures as well, bottles with dubious liquids, plague plasters that promise more than common sense, and tonics that smell faintly of rotten apples and hope. One vendor waves a mouldy-looking jar in your direction. Matured for potency, he explains, with the air of a vintner. The best cures are the ones that have survived a few seasons themselves. You try not to look too sceptical as he extols the virtues of his elixir of endurance, which seems to contain roughly equal parts vinegar, honey, and courage. A little drama unfolds as a farmer's wife asks for a love potion. Nothing too strong, she says with a wink. The apothecary offers a bottle filled with a rosy syrup, promising gentle affections, not wild passions. There's a ripple of amusement from those listening in. Someone whispers, "Hope she doesn't use it on the cow again," and everyone tries not to laugh too loudly. There's also an unmistakable element of fear and desperation. A frail old man asks in a trembling voice for anything to keep death away. The apothecary hands him a sachet of herbs, murmuring words that sound half prayer, half promise. No one snickers now. Death is always near in the medieval world, and sometimes the best comfort comes from the kindness of a stranger and a little pouch of something that smells of earth and sunlight. You see all sorts come here. Tough old labourers, children sniffling with cold, anxious brides searching for good luck, even priests, though they are careful to buy only the most respectable remedies. One apothecary claims his tonics are approved by the bishop, which draws a sceptical eyebrow from the friar who happens to be passing by. "God gave us herbs," the apothecary says, and I just put them in a bottle. Some remedies are little more than superstition, but that doesn't stop people from buying. One mother tucks a bit of dried rosemary into her daughter's apron, for cleverness and memory. Another ties a red ribbon around a jar of poppy syrup, for sleep and gentle dreams. The children seem to believe in the magic as much as the medicine, and you can't help but smile as a little boy trades his last copper for a thimble-sized bottle labelled for bravery at night. Not all customers are satisfied. One young man, clutching his head, demands a refund for a headache tonic that didn't cure my troubles, just made them taste funny. The apothecary shrugs. Some headaches are stronger than any medicine, and hands him a peppermint stick. Try this next time, and if it fails, at least your breath will be sweet. There are scholarly debates here too. You hear two learned-looking men argue over the merits of mandrake root versus foxglove, each quoting ancient texts and local legends. Mandrake will cure the pox, insists one. Or cause it, retorts the other. The crowd listens with interest, some believing, some sceptical, all entertained. Historians still argue whether the so-called medicines of the medieval market truly healed, or whether belief was the most potent ingredient of all. A juggler appears, balancing 3 jars marked snake oil. The apothecary chases him off, shouting, "If my remedies were as useless as yours, the whole town would be coughing." The crowd laughs, and the juggler bows, only to sneak back later to try and sell his wares to the children, who seem more interested in the snake than the oil. In the end, what you leave with isn't just a packet of powder or a jar of syrup. It's the sense of possibility, the hope that maybe, just maybe, this little something will make the coming days brighter. You tuck a small vial labelled Restful Nights into your pouch, uncertain whether it will work, but warmed by the memory of the old apothecary's gentle smile. As you move away from the apothecary's stalls, the scents of mint, vinegar, and dried flowers cling to your clothes. The hush gives way once more to the bustle of the wider market, but you carry a trace of that hopeful, bittersweet hush with you. A reminder that in the medieval world as now, everyone is looking for a cure, a comfort, or a little magic to see them through. The further you drift from the apothecary's cloud of sweet and sour scents, the more the sounds of the market transform again. Gone are the haggling voices and measured chants of sellers. Now you're greeted by a chorus of bleats, clucks, squawks, and a steadily rising undertone of chaos. You're entering the livestock pens, a world where feet are as muddy as the gossip, and where your purchase might just wander away if you don't hold on tight enough. Even before you see them, you hear the animals, chickens clattering against wooden cages, goats braying their opinions of market life, and the occasional outraged honk of a goose who's determined to make its displeasure everyone's problem. Livestock are at the heart of many medieval markets, for this is a world where a single animal can mean the difference between hunger and plenty, between paying your taxes and pleading for mercy. Here, a clutch of eggs, a healthy hen, or a sturdy goat is as valuable as any jewel or coin. You step around a puddle, at least you hope it's just water, and approach the first pen. A wiry old farmer leans over his flock of chickens, his face lined like a dried apple. He waves a gnarled stick and shouts out his sales pitch, "All strong layers, all of them, never lost an egg to a fox." You watch as a potential buyer, an equally wiry woman, inspects each bird with the critical eye of a jeweller. She checks beaks, eyes, and feathers, muttering under her breath about last year's scrawny pullets and the rooster that turned out to be all voice, no vigour. The negotiations are tough. The two could be ancient rivals or long-lost friends, and you suspect in this world they're often both. Every deal is a little drama. A boy in patched trousers tries to barter a string of onions for a single chick, and the farmer eyes him thoughtfully. "Bring me 2 onions and a promise you'll feed it better than your sister's cat, and it's yours." The boy nods solemnly. Barter is as common as coin here, and sometimes far more interesting. Goats for cheese, eggs for bread, a basket of apples for a goose, if you can catch it. The chicken cages rattle as a young girl with straw in her hair attempts to corral a runaway hen. The bird ducks under a cart, scattering the feet of bystanders, and sending one merchant hopping with a startled yelp. The crowd laughs and someone shouts, "Don't let it escape. That one's half your breakfast." It takes 3 tries, 2 children and a quick-handed grandmother to return the hen to its cage, but when it's over, everyone cheers. You get the feeling these moments are as much a part of the market as any sale. Next to the chickens, a pen of ducks offers a different kind of chorus. They waddle in tight circles, quacking in alarm whenever anyone gets too close. Their owner, a robust woman with arms like hams, insists her birds are the plumpest in town, good for the Lord's table or the peasant's stew pot. She demonstrates by picking up the feistiest drake, who promptly nips her thumb and is rewarded with a fond pat and a muttered, "You'll fetch a high price, troublemaker." Beyond the poultry, the goat pens are alive with movement. Goats in all shapes and colours mill about, occasionally rearing up to butt heads or reaching for a tempting lock of your hair if you stand too close. Their owner, a middle-aged man with a beard nearly as long as some of his charger's horns, is in the middle of another negotiation. "Best milkers in the county," he insists, and clever enough to open the gate if you're not careful. The prospective buyer raises an eyebrow, glancing at the goats with a mixture of admiration and caution. One particularly mischievous goat manages to slip its head through the rails and nab a turnip from an unsuspecting vendor's basket. The resulting chase, a blend of athleticism, shouting and resigned laughter, draws a small audience. Eventually the vendor retrieves his turnip, the goat returns to its pen with a mouthful of victory, and the crowd disperses, everyone richer for the story. Cows and calves low in a larger paddock at the edge of the pens, their presence quieter but no less important. Buying a cow is a serious investment, the medieval equivalent of purchasing a new car. You watch as a family, all gathered together, runs, practiced, hands over a cow's flank, checks her teeth, and debates whether she looks like a buttercup or a daisy. The seller waits, patient and silent, knowing this decision isn't just about today's coin, but about a season's worth of milk, butter, and possibly a new calf in the spring. Not far away, a pair of small pigs root through straw, their snouts twitching. Their seller, quick-witted and full of jokes, insists they'll find truffles if you teach them Latin. Someone retorts, "If I knew Latin, I'd be buying silks, not pigs." The crowd enjoys the banter, and the pigs seem content to let the humans argue. Then there's the geese. Oh, the geese. If chickens are the steady backbone of the market, geese are the mischief, the drama, and the unpredictable element that keeps everyone on their toes. You see a flock penned with what can only be described as controlled chaos. The largest goose stands guard, wings outstretched, eyeing every passerby with the suspicion of a seasoned bodyguard. Try to get close and it hisses, snapping its beak at shoes and ankles alike. He's the boss, the seller shrugs, and worth 2 watchdogs any night. Indeed, many a medieval homestead relies on geese for alarm. Nobody, not even a desperate thief, wants to tangle with an angry gander. A small drama plays out as a young couple attempts to select a goose for their wedding feast. The seller presents a fat, glossy specimen, but the groom seems nervous. "You sure it won't attack us at the altar?" he jokes. The seller assures him that, once roasted, they're all perfectly docile. Even the geese seem to appreciate the humour, though one flaps its wings just as the couple tries to leave, sending feathers and laughter everywhere. Sometimes the animals are more than just food. They're currency, companions, even the market's entertainment. A farmer boasts that his old goat can count, and a crowd gathers to watch as he coaxes the animal through a series of tricks. Whether it's true skill or a well-timed toss of treats is anyone's guess, but the laughter is real, and the goat seems pleased with itself. You spot a few exotic animals too. A pair of rabbits, soft as clouds and twice as fast. A flock of doves for sale, to bring peace to your house. And even, for the truly daring, a tethered wild boar piglet with a sign reading, "Best left alone." No one seems eager to haggle over that one. There's a touch of competition among the sellers, of course. Each boasts that their animals are hardier, cleverer, tastier, or more productive than any others in town. My hens lay double in the spring. My ducks don't mind the cold. My sheep have the best wool on this side of the river. Each claim is met with a counterclaim, and the buyers listen with a shrewd ear, often letting the animals themselves make the best argument. After all, the shiniest feathers or the fattest goat speak louder than any pitch. Throughout it all, barter is king. You see eggs swapped for onions, cheese for a kid goat, and once, memorably, a pair of boots for a particularly cantankerous rooster. He'll guard your yard and keep your neighbours up at night. Children mill about, learning the art of negotiation by trading pebbles, bits of string, or promises to do chores. Historians still argue whether such informal deals were more common than formal contracts, but in this noisy, muddy corner of the market, it seems the world runs on good faith, a handshake and the occasional squawk. As night approaches, the sellers begin to pack up. Some buyers lead their new animals home on ropes, others pile cages onto carts, and a few, perhaps the wiser ones, simply shake hands, make promises, and wait for the next market day. The air is full of promises and farewells, and as you slip away you catch the last echo of a goose's indignant honk, a rooster's crow, and a child's delighted shout. The livestock pens might be muddy and chaotic, but they're also the heart of medieval survival, a reminder that for all the exotic spices and gleaming trinkets, sometimes the most valuable purchase is the one that clucks, bleats, or honks right back. You wipe your boots on the grass and leave the noisy, feathery chaos of the livestock behind, stepping into a quieter, sweeter-smelling stretch of the market. If the world of goats and geese is all clamour and mischief, here it's abundance and temptation. Baskets and barrels overflow with fruits, nuts, and the sort of confections that could make a medieval child or a weary adult dream of heaven. The market's produce quarter glows in the golden lantern light, colours deepening into jewels, apples red as winter cheeks, pears glowing with a mellow green, plums so purple they nearly vanish into the dusk. You pass a cluster of tables loaded with the season's best. Fruit sellers beckon, their voices a little softer than the livestock traders, more invitation than demand. "First apples of the harvest," calls one, and the crowd gathers, eager to taste a crisp bite after a long summer of stewed turnips and dried peas. You watch as a pair of girls hold out a battered copper coin for a single shiny apple, their faces lit with giddy anticipation. The seller, seeing their delight, slips them an extra. Small kindnesses are the true currency of market day. If you were expecting piles of gleaming, unblemished fruit, you'd be wrong. Here, beauty is a little rough around the edges. Apples with spots, pears with knobbly stems, plums sometimes more tart than sweet. But taste rules above all. You're invited to try a wedge of sharp green apple, dipped in a dab of honey by a beaming farmer's wife. "Makes the teeth sharp and the mind sharper," she says, offering another slice. The honey is thick and floral, collected from hives at the edge of the forest. It tastes of summer meadows and a touch of wildness. Beneath the tables, baskets brim with nuts, walnuts and hazelnuts, chestnuts in prickly husks, even a few rare almonds for those with a heavy purse. A trio of boys crack walnuts on the stones, giggling as they compete to find the biggest, fattest kernel. "Save your shells for the fire," shouts the nut seller, or for tossing at your brother when he won't stop talking. There's a casual camaraderie here, people trading jokes and handfuls of nuts, swapping last year's recipes for roasted chestnuts or nut-studded breads. Next to the fruit sellers is a row of women and boys hawking dried treats, slices of apple, leathery strips of pear, plums dried into wrinkled, sticky jewels. "Winter's candy," they call. One seller lifts a handful of dried cherries, red and glistening, inviting you to taste. You chew thoughtfully, they're tart, sweet, and faintly smoky from the drying fires. "They'll keep until spring, unless you eat them all tonight," she grins. There's always a bit of risk, of course. Dried fruit in the medieval world is a delicacy, but also a gamble. Sometimes the odd worm or two sneaks in, and you catch a girl holding a slice of apple up to the lantern to check it for any unexpected guests. Her mother assures her that a little protein never hurt anyone, but the girl chooses another slice all the same. At another table, an old man with a shock of white hair presides over a mountain of hazelnuts. He cracks one with a practiced flick, offering it to you. Best eaten fresh, but if you bury some in the cellar, they'll keep you through the hardest winter. He tells you that when he was young, children used to play nut wars in the alleys. Teams would gather at the edge of the village and pelt each other with handfuls of nuts. The winner the one who came home with the most unbroken shells. You can still see the dents in old market doors, he chuckles. You're offered sugared almonds in a delicate cone of parchment for weddings, births, and bribing the priest, the seller confides, eyes twinkling. They're expensive, each one a tiny, glossy miracle, and you see a bride-to-be clutching a precious handful as if they hold the secret to a lifetime of happiness. Historians still argue whether sugared almonds first arrived by ship or were dreamed up by a clever cook with access to honey and patience. Either way, they taste like celebration. The queen of the fruit stalls, though, is always the rarest offering. Sometimes figs, sometimes dates, now and then even an orange carried hundreds of miles by traders. One day, you might see a cluster of fresh figs, dark and glossy. The next, a single bowl of candied lemon peels, their sharpness cut by honey and hope. The sellers know their worth, haggling with a smile but never dropping their price too low. When a merchant buys the last of the figs, a small crowd forms, watching as he splits them among his children, each child savouring their share like its treasure. There's no shortage of cleverness here. One woman, cleverer than most, has invented a market game. Guess the fruit, win a treat. She blindfolds willing customers and presses a slice of fruit to their lips. Plum, apple, pear, quince. Guess correctly, and you win a handful of nuts. Guess wrong, and she makes up a forfeit. Sing the loudest song you know, or tell us the silliest story you've ever heard. Laughter rings out, drawing even the fruit sellers from neighbouring stalls to join in the fun. A little farther on, a young boy holds up a jar of honey, its golden glow deepening in the lantern light. Best in the Shire, he boasts, echoing words he's clearly heard from his elders. The honey is thick and fragrant with the sharp edge of wildflowers. His grandmother behind him offers honeycombs for those who like to chew on sweetness, or for healers who use honey in medicines and plasters. Keeps wounds clean and tempers sweeter, she says. A few old women nod sagely. Honey is a healer and a treat, a bit of everyday magic everyone can believe in. There are even forbidden treats, whispered about at the edges of the crowd. A jar of candied violets passed quietly from hand to hand, a tiny dish of preserved rose petals said to bring love in the spring. Some claim that eating certain wild berries brings good luck. Others insist it's just a shortcut to an evening spent regretting your choices. Historians still argue whether these floral sweets are rooted in ancient tradition, or just a clever way to use up extra sugar and flowers before they spoil. Of course, you hear warnings too. Don't eat too many green plums or you'll be running to the privy all night, and if the nuts rattle, they're no good. The fruit sellers share these warnings with a wink. Every market regular has a story about someone who didn't listen and paid the price with a rumbling stomach or worse. The produce quarter is also a centre for friendly gossip and matchmaking. A group of young women gather by the baskets of pears, accidentally bumping into the butcher's apprentices or the baker's sons. One sly grandmother arranges a meeting between her granddaughter and a bashful cheese seller over a shared bowl of cherries. If a romance starts in the fruit stalls, the whole market will know by nightfall, and probably have a song about it by next week. Underneath it all is a steady hum of barter and banter. I'll swap you 3 apples for a handful of hazelnuts. I'll give you this jar of honey if you tell me who stole my best basket last week. Children swap fruit for marbles or for promises of future chores. There's an easy rhythm here, a feeling that everyone is just a little bit richer when the day is done. As darkness thickens, the lanterns cast the stalls in a golden haze. Sellers begin to pack away what remains, tucking fruit into baskets, gathering nuts into sacks and wrapping precious confections in cloth. A few lucky buyers get end-of-market deals, a bag of apples for half price, a handful of walnuts tossed in as a gift. There's generosity in the air, the kind that only comes after a long day's business and the knowledge that tomorrow everyone will be neighbours again. You tuck a handful of dried cherries into your pouch, their sweet tang a reminder of the warmth and laughter here. As you leave, you catch the scent of honey and the bright memory of a child's delighted shout. In this corner of the medieval market, it's easy to believe that life is a little sweeter and a little more magical than anywhere else in the world. Your pouch a little heavier with fruit and nuts, you follow the waning buzz of the produce quarter and find yourself among the most ingenious merchants of the medieval market, the craftspeople. This is where the steady, clever work of hands is transformed into objects that are not just useful, but sometimes wondrous. Everything here is evidence of skill. Carved, woven, turned on a lathe, shaped in clay, or stitched so finely you wonder how human fingers managed it. You pause first at a carpenter's stall. The air smells of fresh wood shavings, pine resin, and linseed oil. Laid out on rough tables are bowls, spoons, rolling pins, and intricately carved boxes that seem almost too beautiful to hide away in a dark cottage. The carpenter, a woman with sawdust in her hair and a calm confidence, demonstrates how she shapes a spoon from a branch, her small knife moving as if it's part of her own hand. "Tougher than it looks," she says, offering the spoon to a curious boy. "Try breaking it." He tries, fails, and beams at her praise. Wooden toys crowd the edges of her table, spinning tops, pull-along animals, jointed figures that dance with a tug of string. A gaggle of children crowd round, each hoping for a turn. The toys are as much a gift for parents as for children. Anything that keeps a little one quiet during evening prayers is worth a few coins or a basket of eggs. Next to her is a turner's stall, with bowls and cups so perfectly round and smooth you'd think they'd slipped out of the hands of the moon herself. The turner spins a lump of wood on his simple lathe, chips flying, his feet working the treadle in a steady rhythm. He glances up, grinning. No two ever come out the same, he admits. Some wood wants to be a bowl, some wants to be a cup, and some just wants to be firewood. The crowd laughs, and you spot a local baker choosing a big, sturdy bowl for kneading dough. "My last one walked off with a wandering monk," she jokes, "so I'll hide this one better." Pottery is the star just a few stalls down. Great stacks of glazed jugs, pitchers and mugs shine in the lantern light, their colours reflecting the earth and the fire that birthed them. The potter, hands coated in clay, demonstrates how to centre a lump on the wheel. You watch, mesmerised, as the lump grows into a jar, then a jug, then, if he's in a playful mood, a frog or a face or a fat little bird. "My wife says I make more animals than bowls these days," he shrugs, "but the children don't mind. Some pottery is rough and practical, big crocks for salting meat, pitchers for carrying water. Other pieces are almost delicate, painted in swirling greens and blues, with lines and dots that dance in the flickering light. A noblewoman, careful in velvet gloves, selects a fine bowl for her table, but the farmers prefer the sturdy jugs and tankards, thick enough to bounce when you drop them. One young man brings back a jug with a chip. The potter examines it, shrugs, and swaps him another. No sense crying over spilled cider, unless you spill it on your mother-in-law. Every craft here has a tradition behind it. The basket makers are at work in a tangle of willow and reed, their fingers quick as spiders weaving tight, neat shapes. Their baskets are piled high. Flat ones for gathering eggs, tall ones for carrying bread, deep ones for laundry or carrying a fussy toddler to grandma's. A good basket's worth more than a bad horse, the oldest basket maker declares, and a lot less trouble to feed. Textile crafts are everywhere. Women sit with laps full of yarn, knitting needles clacking in companionable rhythm. Others ply spindles, spinning fleece into fine thread. The best weavers show off their newest lengths of cloth, blankets thick and warm for winter, narrow bands for belts, even a handful of delicate lace collars for those with fancier tastes. You overhear two weavers debating the merits of sheep from different fields. "The Highland sheep give softer wool," says one. "Aye," the other counters, "but the lowland sheep don't wander off as often." Historians still argue whether location or sheep breed mattered more, but both weavers seem equally proud. There's no shortage of clever inventions. At one stall, a tinker has laid out every kind of household gadget: whisks made from twisted willow, sieves for sifting flour, candle moulds, and clever iron hooks for hanging pots over a fire. "Fix anything but a broken heart," he promises, with a twinkle in his eye. "And if you bring me one of those, I'll at least mend your kettle so you can make tea and cry in comfort. You find yourself drawn to a leatherworker's tent where the air smells of tanning, smoke and beeswax. Here are belts, shoes, gloves, saddles, and, pride of place, a row of purses for holding market coins. One little girl runs her hands over a tiny pair of boots. Those are for walking in fairy rings, the leatherworker whispers, but mind you don't get lost. Her mother purchases a sturdy pair for her husband, the craftsman promising they'll last till the next king if he stays out of the rain. Everyone laughs, and the girl clutches her new shoes as if they hold the promise of a whole new world. In a nearby alcove, a horn worker polishes combs, drinking cups, and spoons made from cow and sheep horn. Stronger than wood, lighter than pewter, and no two ever look alike, he declares. His best sellers are horn buttons, each one carved with a different pattern. Shoppers sort through them, hunting for matches or just a lucky charm to sew into a coat. There are tools and utensils for every occasion. Mortars and pestles for the kitchen, rolling pins for the bakers, spindles for the spinners. A group of boys gathers around a stall selling wooden whistles and flutes. The merchant demonstrates a piercing note that sends a nearby goat into a minor panic. Best way to call the children home for supper, he winks. The parents look sceptical, but the boys are enthralled. The craftspeople aren't just sellers, they're performers, proud of their skill and quick to teach or show off. One weaver invites children to try a few rows on her loom, guiding their hands and smiling at their uneven progress. A carpenter lets an apprentice try the lathe, offering gentle advice and a careful watch. The best lesson here isn't just how to shape wood or weave cloth, it's that patience, practice and pride make anything possible. As you stroll, you overhear old stories and superstitions. A bowl carved from ash keeps the milk from turning. Never put a new basket down before you've filled it with something, else it'll always be empty. Sleep with a horn comb under your pillow and you'll dream of your true love. Some crafts are communal. In one corner, women gather to patch quilts together, exchanging news, gossip and a little song. A patch of blue here, a scrap of red there. A blanket becomes a family history, stitched together in laughter and shared memory. Each quilt tells a story, not just of warmth, but of nights around the fire and hands joined in work and friendship. As the lanterns glow brighter, the craftspeople begin to pack away their tools. Wood shavings and scraps of cloth litter the ground, evidence of a day's honest work. Some sellers linger, finishing a basket or a bit of carving by lamplight. You spot a pair of lovers haggling over a set of matching mugs. He claims the handles are just the right size for holding hands. She insists the colours will match her tablecloth. They buy both, giggling as they walk away. You carry with you a simple carved spoon, its wood smooth and warm in your hand, and a new respect for the hidden world of skill that shapes every day of medieval life. Without these hands and these hearts, no market, feast or family could survive. As you step away, you hear the craftspeople's laughter echoing in the cool night air. Their work is never truly finished. There is always another bowl to shape, another basket to weave, another story to share. The medieval market, you realise, is not just a place of buying and selling, but of creating, teaching and belonging. Here, you are always part of something, one more thread in the endless tapestry of making and mending, living and dreaming. As you continue through the lantern-lit lanes, the gentle chatter of craftspeople gives way to the lively and irresistible hum of prepared foods, ready to eat, piping hot, and altogether impossible to resist. If you thought the market was busy before, here in the food court, medieval style, it positively crackles with energy. The air is alive with the sizzle of roasting meat, the snap and pop of frying dough, and the mouth-watering perfume of spices and sweeteners from 100 small fires. After a day of shopping, trading, haggling and wandering, the whole town is hungry, and so are you. At the entrance to this feast-filled stretch, a trio of women serve flatbreads pulled hot from a clay oven, their edges charred and bubbling. Try it with garlic and salt, they call, slapping dollops of herbed butter onto steaming rounds. The crowd lines up, adults reaching for hearty wedges, children clustering for smaller bites, each person eager for a taste of something fresh from the flames. You take your turn, and the bread is so hot it nearly burns your fingers, the crust crackling and soft inside, the flavour sharp with wild garlic and creamy with a touch of goat's cheese. A little farther along, a boy sells skewers of roast meat. "Mystery beast tonight," he announces, eyes sparkling. The meat is smoky, juicy, and just mysterious enough that you're better off not asking for specifics. "Tastes like chicken, eats like trouble," a neighbour mutters, chewing with relish. Some vendors offer cuts of pork and lamb seasoned with pepper, sage, and, if you're lucky, a precious dusting of imported spices. Others serve whole fowl, spit-roasted over open fires, the skin crisp and golden, the scent drawing a crowd from all corners of the market. One stand specialises in fried fish, little perch or carp, dredged in barley flour and fried until golden, then sprinkled with vinegar and handed over in a scrap of linen. "River's been generous this week," the cook claims. "The fish is crisp on the outside, tender inside, and so fresh you'd swear you could still hear the splash." Children hover nearby, begging for the crispy tails considered the best part by local wisdom. Nearby, a pair of older women serve a market favourite, hot pottage. This thick, savoury stew bubbles in great iron pots, sending up clouds of steam fragrant with onion, carrot, and whichever scraps of meat or vegetables have survived the day. Each vendor has her own secret recipe, passed down from mothers and grandmothers, and there's no end to the argument over whose is the best. You're handed a bowl thick with barley and herbs, the warmth chasing away the chill of evening, the flavour honest and hearty. Someone at your elbow jokes that a good pottage cures all ills, except too much pottage. You don't doubt it. For those with a sweet tooth, the confectioner's stalls are a dream, and a test of willpower. Baskets overflow with honey cakes, fritters, and small tarts filled with stewed fruits. There are crispy, golden pastries drizzled with honey, dusted with ground almonds, and sometimes, for those with a coin or two to spare, spiced with cinnamon or ginger. The sweet sellers compete for attention, each one offering samples with a wink. "Just one bite and you'll dream sweeter tonight," calls a plump woman, her cakes arrayed like treasure. Children's faces are sticky with honey and joy, adults sneak an extra tart for later just in case. Roasted nuts crackle in baskets, chestnuts and walnuts spun in pans over the fire until they're piping hot. You buy a small cone of them, burning your fingers and tongue in equal measure, but loving every bite. "Nothing better on a cold night," a nearby man declares, tucking a few into his wife's pocket when she isn't looking. At the edge of the food court, an enterprising cook ladles out mulled cider, steaming and rich with apple and spice. "Best for cold hands and colder hearts," he jokes, pressing a mug into your palms. The heat radiates through your fingers, and the sweet spice cider slips down smooth as silk. For those seeking stronger refreshment, there are makeshift alehouses, nothing more than a barrel and a bench, where mugs of dark, nutty ale are poured and passed among friends. There's something celebratory about this part of the market. Everyone is here, young and old, rich and poor, merchants flush with coin and apprentices counting their pennies. The food draws them together, breaking down the invisible lines that separated them earlier in the day. People eat standing, sitting, even sprawled on the grass beneath the lanterns. Laughter bubbles up, stories are shared, and the occasional song breaks out as bellies fill and hearts lighten. You spot a group of musicians tucked into a corner, playing a lively tune on fiddle, pipe, and drum. Their hats rest on the ground, quickly filling with coins and the odd crust of bread from grateful listeners. The music is infectious. A pair of boys leap up to dance, spinning in clumsy circles until they tumble down, breathless and delighted. Someone tosses them a tart and the laughter doubles. At the edge of the crowd, a slender girl offers candied nuts skewered on twigs, hazelnuts and walnuts dipped in honey, then rolled in crushed seeds or a sprinkle of sugar. "For luck on your way home," she says, smiling shyly. You buy a skewer, savouring the sweetness and the crunch, and tuck another away, for tomorrow's troubles. You're drawn to a stand selling pies. round, flaky pastries stuffed with minced meat, onions, and, if the mood strikes the cook, a handful of raisins or chopped apples. A whole meal in one hand, the vendor boasts, good for the road or the supper table. The crust is buttery, the filling savoury and sweet, the kind of food that tastes of comfort and home. Food isn't just about filling bellies though, it's about stories, traditions, and the subtle dance of rivalry and pride. You overhear cooks debating who invented the best honey cake, or whose family recipe for mulled cider was the first to include a pinch of clove. My grandmother stole her recipe from the bishop's cook, boasts one woman, earning mock outrage from her friend who claims, "Everyone knows the bishop's cook got it from my aunt." Historians still argue whether such recipes were truly passed down or simply reinvented every market day. The truth hardly matters. The arguments are half the fun, and the sharing of secrets, real or imagined, is as sweet as any treat on offer. There are even daring new dishes for the brave. One cook offers puffed cheese curds, dropped into hot oil until they're golden and airy. Another tries out fried onions coated in barley flour. Crispy rings, a hit among children and adults alike. You'll see them everywhere by next summer, he predicts. Mark my words, I'm starting a trend. Everyone laughs, but by the end of the night his stall is empty. For those nursing sore throats or tired voices after a day of shouting, a vendor hands out hot drinks, thick, spiced milk, or a brew of lemon and honey. Guaranteed to keep you singing till dawn, he winks. Some claim a secret dash of brandy. Others say the real trick is simply resting your feet and sipping something warm in good company. As the moon rises, the mood grows even merrier. Someone lights a bonfire at the centre of the food court, and people gather to share the last of their meals. Broken bread, bits of cheese, the final sip of ale. The musicians play softer now, and the songs drift from lively reels to gentle lullabies. You find a quiet spot near the fire, savouring the last bites of your honey cake, the sweet warmth of cider, and the soft, contented noise of a town well fed and well pleased. A group of elders settle in by the fire, telling tales of markets past, how the bread was better, the apples sweeter, or the geese meaner. Children listen wide-eyed, parents smile, and everyone is drawn closer by the glow and the shared memories. Someone mentions a market years ago when the rains nearly washed away every stall, but the whole village ate together beneath a makeshift tent. We had nothing but onions and bread, but it was a feast all the same. As the last morsels are eaten, the food vendors pack up, washing pans, banking fires, and slipping unsold treats to hungry children or a lucky dog or two. You're left with a deep feeling of satisfaction, a sense of belonging that can't be bought or sold, only earned through shared food and laughter under a sky full of stars. With the night deepening, you take one last look at the food court, the embers glowing and voices fading to gentle goodnights. In this place, where every meal is a celebration and every bite a memory, you know you'll carry the taste of this market, warm, sweet, and full of life, long after you've left its lantern-lit lanes behind. The bonfire embers in the food court still glow behind you, and your belly's pleasantly full. Now, your wandering feet, and a mind still awake with market energy, pull you into a quieter, more contemplative avenue of the medieval marketplace, the world of written word, music, and performance. Yes, even in times when many could neither read nor write, the hunger for stories, learning, and entertainment was as fierce as any appetite for bread or ale. Here the first stalls are lined not with food or wares, but with neatly stacked sheets of parchment and rough paper, inkwells and quills arranged like so many feathers waiting for flight. These are the scribes and stationers, often perched at their tables and illuminated by lanterns that shine on their careful script. You watch a scribe, her fingers stained with black and red ink, as she bends over a commission, a prayer, copied out in looping Latin to be taken home and pinned above a hearth. Spells for safe journeys and blessings for the bread, she explains, and a little poetry when the mood takes them. Next to her, a boy of about 12 sharpens a quill and practices his letters, the tip scratching faintly on parchment. My father says if I learn my letters, I'll never go hungry, he tells you. But I think he just likes having someone to write out his bills. There's a pride in the boy's work and in the scribe's careful corrections, a small daily hope that knowledge is itself a form of fortune. For those who cannot read, there are storytellers and singers, ready to trade tales for a crust of bread, a spare coin, or just a spot near the fire. You find yourself drawn to a crowd clustered around a travelling bard, his cloak patched with scraps of every colour, his voice strong enough to reach the back of the market square. He tells a tale of a foolish knight, a clever fox, and the perils of buying shoes from a goblin. The crowd roars with laughter at the knight's misadventures, and even the market guards can't keep a straight face. A woman nearby sings old ballads, her voice ringing out like a bell above the clamour. She draws listeners from every stall, apprentices, weavers, bakers and beggars alike, each one stilled by her song of love lost and found again. When she finishes, a hush lingers, the kind that comes only when a story or song has found its mark. There's more to buy here than books and blessings. The illuminators, artists with steady hands and a love for colour, offer tiny painted scenes for sale. You spot bookmarks and little prayer cards, each one bright with gold and jewel tones, saints and dragons, birds and vines. A bit of beauty for your table, your wall, or your pocket, the painter murmurs. A merchant buys a card for her daughter, and the child holds it like a secret. Music, too, is everywhere. A pair of pipers and a fiddler tune their instruments near the end of the lane, filling the night air with quicksilver notes. The market is alive with feet tapping, hands clapping, and dancers spinning in the narrow spaces between stalls. Children twirl, partners trade places, and every so often someone tries a step too bold and ends up laughing on the ground. Not far from the musicians, a maker of instruments displays his wares: lutes, fiddles, pipes and drums. He runs his hands over the polished wood, explaining the virtues of each one. This one for a wedding, this one for mourning, and this for when you just need to make a little noise. A young couple try a duet, she on a tiny pipe, he on a battered drum. Their tune is ragged but joyous, and the crowd cheers them on. For those interested in learning, there are wandering teachers, old monks, former scholars, and women who once served as scribes or nurses. They offer lessons in reading, in numbers, or in how to keep your purse from being lightened by clever merchants. You overhear a cluster of boys reciting sums, a girl tracing letters in sand, and a grandmother bargaining for a lesson in the healing properties of herbs, just enough to keep the neighbours impressed. Some stalls cater to the spiritual needs of the market. Rosaries, prayer beads, little wooden crosses, and tiny icons are arrayed for sale, each one crafted with care. A friar offers prayers for a penny, and more than one person kneels for a quiet moment of blessing before heading back to the bustle. A prayer in your pocket weighs nothing, he says, but sometimes it's worth more than a purse of silver. It isn't all solemn, though. A troupe of jugglers sets up in an open square, drawing a noisy, delighted crowd. They toss balls, knives, even a squawking chicken, who seems oddly pleased with its role, keeping half the market entertained and the other half pretending not to watch. Their patter is quick and clever, and they finish their show with a bow, passing the hat and gathering coins and laughter in equal measure. Everywhere you find bits of wit and wisdom pinned to the walls, proverbs in rough Latin or French, jokes scratched in charcoal, riddles left for the next customer. What runs but never tires? One scrawl asks. The market gossip, someone has answered, and another hand has added. Or the girl who owes you a penny. You smile, reading these little snippets, the medieval equivalent of memes and graffiti. Even here, the art of barter rules. A scribe exchanges a written blessing for a loaf of bread. The instrument maker gives a drum to a boy who promises to help him pack up at the end of the night. A storyteller's tale is repaid with a mug of cider, a bit of cheese, or simply a hearty round of applause. Historians still argue whether these exchanges were more valuable than coin, or simply the oldest, purest form of currency. In a quiet corner you discover a chalk artist drawing scenes on a scrap of old wood. A knight's quest, a market day, the faces of the crowd. People stop to watch, some to offer a coin, others just to marvel at how a handful of chalk and a clever hand can turn the ordinary into something worth remembering. There are debates and rivalries here too. Who tells the best story? Whose music moves the most hearts? Whose blessing is the most effective? If your luck doesn't turn after my prayer, one friar jokes, it must be your shoes. The crowd laughs, and you notice that, here in the world of words and music, the boundaries between classes, trades and towns melt away. Everyone is an audience, and everyone at some point gets a turn on stage. As the hour grows late, families cluster together to listen to one last tale before heading home. Children sit cross-legged at the feet of storytellers, wide-eyed with wonder. Young lovers slip away into the shadows, whispering their own poetry. The scribes pack up their precious scraps of paper, the musicians tuck their pipes and fiddles under their arms, and the last chorus of a lullaby drifts through the market square. You leave this quarter with your mind spinning with stories, your ears full of music and a scrap of parchment in your pocket. Your name written in careful letters by a patient scribe. Proof that even in a world of goods and coins, the greatest treasures are the ones that linger long after the market is gone. The lanterns have burned low, their soft golden glow beginning to merge with the gentle indigo of a sky nearly spent of stars. You find yourself at the very far edge of the medieval market, where the bustle slows and the air feels a little cooler, scented with damp earth and fading wood smoke. Here, past the food, the crafts, the music and the bargains, you walk into the twilight world of odds and ends, a place for everything that didn't quite fit elsewhere, and for everyone reluctant to let the day end. The first stall you encounter is a jumbled treasure trove. Its keeper, an elderly man with a thick white beard and eyes sharp as a hawk's, sits surrounded by boxes and baskets filled with the market's lost and found. A single glove without a mate, old iron keys whose locks are long gone, a cracked goblet, an ancient shoe buckle, and a scattering of broken combs and buttons. Everything finds a use eventually, he declares, except maybe this left boot. I'm still waiting for the man with only one left foot. Children are especially drawn to this stall, peering into boxes, marvelling at mysterious objects. One girl finds a bent brass candlestick and holds it aloft as if it were a king's sceptre. The stall-holder winks at her. Might have belonged to a princess. Or a pirate. You never know with candlesticks. A boy haggles over a small chipped spinning top, convinced it will spin forever if you wish hard enough. Around you, adults rummage for that one button to match their coat, a needle just the right size or a bit of ribbon to finish a festival garland. The odds and ends stretch is not only about finding bargains, it's a place for stories, memories, and the art of making do. You watch as a farmer barters a cracked lantern for a length of rope. Needs just a bit of fixing, the seller insists, like most things in life. Someone exchanges a wooden spoon for a handful of nails, while an old woman offers a half-worn cap for a length of thread. The trades are humble, but each is a victory against waste, a triumph of practicality, and, often, a chance to share a joke. Here you also find tools and gear that don't quite match their original owners. A shepherd's crook, slightly warped, a fisherman's net, patched but still strong, a pair of wooden clogs with one strap missing. The sellers here are philosophers as much as merchants. Every tool's got a story, one says, holding up a dented tin mug. This one's seen every sunrise from here to the river, he grins, and every spilled drink too. Some of the market's more eccentric figures prefer these twilight stalls. You pass an old woman selling homemade remedies, none as convincing as those in the apothecary's quarter, but all the more mysterious. Her table is a jumble of jars, each labelled in wobbly handwriting. Good for coughs and cranky moods, stops chickens pecking each other, and luck in a bottle. She waves her hands and mutters a rhyme with each sale, to the delight of the children and the mild alarm of a few more superstitious buyers. You notice too the collectors, those who spend the day searching for that one missing thing, a book to complete a shelf, a teacup that matches a long-lost set, a little wooden toy for a child whose mother can't spare a coin. For them, this part of the market is less about price and more about the hope of finding something that feels like destiny. There's a gentle, determined hope in the way they search and smile when their hands finally close around the perfect piece. Some stalls are nearly empty, their tables marked only by the faded outlines of wares now sold. But at the edge, one last merchant sets out lanterns made from scraps of coloured glass and bits of tin. Their flickering light is softer than fire, painting patches of blue, red and green on the faces of the remaining market-goers. Children gape, and adults smile, drawn by the unexpected beauty conjured from leftover pieces. No two the same, the lantern seller boasts, like the people who carry them home. The final odds and ends stall is run by a pair of elderly sisters, their hands quick and sure as they mend whatever is handed to them. Teapots with cracked lids, baskets with broken handles, and even the occasional stuffed doll with one eye missing. They work as a team, their movements wordless but perfectly coordinated. As they finish a repair, they hand the item back with a blessing. May it serve you twice as well and last you twice as long. There is a hush here that feels different from the rest of the market. It's a place of gratitude for small things, of finding worth in what others have forgotten or discarded. People here take comfort in the patchwork of oddities, the chance to give something a new home. You realise, with a soft pang, that the story of the market is as much about renewal and hope as about trade and bustle. As the night grows deep, the stalls close one by one. Sellers gather up their unsold treasures, tucking them away for next week or handing them over to friends, neighbours, or the children who linger until the last. Lanterns are snuffed, laughter drifts away on the cooling air, and only a handful of souls remain, reluctant to let the magic end. You stand for a long moment, watching the last glimmer of coloured lantern light flicker against the stone wall. Someone nearby quietly hums a lullaby, and the breeze carries the tune through the emptying square. Your hands are full, a spoon, a ribbon, a honey cake, a little bottle of something that smells like lavender and dreams, but it's your heart that feels most full. A quiet, satisfying fullness born of stories, laughter, and the certainty that you've witnessed something timeless. For a brief shining moment you imagine the next market day, the stalls bursting open at dawn, the traders and buyers flocking in, the stories starting again. It's an endless cycle, this world of barter, hope and ingenuity. Historians still argue whether the medieval market was a place of chaos or community, of sharp dealing or shared wonder. Standing here, you think it was all those things, and perhaps, if you're lucky, a place where the odds and ends of your own heart find their match. The sky is almost empty of stars now, the air tinged with dew and the slow, inevitable return of ordinary life. But the market's last treasures, a laugh, a song, a shared cup of cider, linger with you as you turn away, stepping back into the hush of the sleeping town, carrying the quiet magic of all you have found. The market's sounds fade now, gentle and slow, like footsteps softening down a winding lane. Lanterns are lowered. One by one, the stories and laughter settle into the corners of memory, as if tucking themselves beneath warm blankets of night. The air is cooler, calm and easy, and each breath feels like the gentle hush after a song. You can picture it. Empty stalls bathed in moonlight, a final curl of wood smoke, the sleepy hum of distant voices promising that dawn will bring bustle once more. The treasures you gathered, so simple, so precious, rest quietly by your side. A spoon, a ribbon, maybe a crumpled slip of parchment with a joke or blessing. You remember each face and voice, every barter and belly laugh, and feel them settle gently in your heart. In this space between worlds, where market day ends and dreams begin, you are never truly alone. The same quiet that settled over the medieval square now settles around you. Your thoughts drift with the scents of honey and herbs, with the faint echo of minstrels' tunes and laughter fading into silence. So let your shoulders loosen, let your breath deepen. The weight of your day and all its odd treasures can be set down for a while. Let the world shrink to the hush of your own room, the softness of your bed, and the safe, slow peace that comes after. Stories are told and lanterns are dark. Let the memory of the market, its magic, its mischief, its music, gently lull you. Close your eyes and slip into a sleep as timeless as a market day, carried on dreams of bright mornings and golden lantern light. Sweet dreams, my dear timeless community.